All right, good evening and welcome to the March 6th meeting of the Facilities Improvement Committee. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so Dan DeWitt is on work travel. He is online, so he's with us. I do need to shift around the agenda a little bit today because I realized it was my daughter's birthday, but I did not realize that we had dinner plans. So I got to leave by 6:30. So Brian's going to take over at 6:30, but I do want to push the Kyle stuff to the beginning so that way I can be here for part of that, and then you guys can do the minutes and stuff like that. I know, so we didn't really talk about this last week, but I know that one of the big things that we were doing.
How about the meeting minutes?
Okay, I want to push that to a little bit later if we could, just so
Okay.
that we have the full hour to kind of hash through stuff. As we talked about at the last meeting, one of the biggest things that we need to figure out right now is what we're doing with this redistribution option, like how we're evaluating it. The superintendent was kind enough to start that process. He has connected with, if you watch the school board meeting, he's connected with at least a few other superintendents who are employing a model that's a 7 through 12, 6 through 12, whatever it may be. But I think what I'm struggling with personally, so this is maybe my selfish need to have Kyle here, is that I want to make sure that we're not just understanding the educational aspect of it, that we're also understanding just what are some of the considerations for physical space, like what do we have to do, and maybe there's things we're missing, right? Because none of us are architects in here. So I asked Kyle to join us. Today's discussion with Kyle is limited only to the redistribution option and only to what we have to do with the actual building, or what things we might have to do with the actual building. We're not discussing any of the other options that are still in play or have not been in play, just because we want to make sure we maximize our time to gain as much information as possible. So I think what might make sense is quickly, if you just want to give a quick update on, because you've already started doing some work on this, and then we'll start the discussion with Kyle.
So just after the last meeting, we had school vacation, last week, so little time on my hands, so I just started to look into this a little bit, and just to gather information. So went onto the DOE website. It's actually very helpful. Was able to find a spreadsheet that listed every school in New Hampshire and its grade span, grade configuration. Put a chart together that shows how many are in each grade span. I'll be able to identify particular schools. From there, you can kind of pull apart, when you look at addresses, which schools are, for lack of a better descriptor, I call them combo schools, so schools that have multiple grade spans within it. So for example, 7 and 8 and 9 and 12. So there is 22 schools that would fit in that category. Not all of them.
Which category?
That they have multiple grade spans within it.
You're just talking high school now?
Nope, talking period. Any schools that have multiple grade spans in it, excluding.
Oh, you mean more than just one?
A middle school and a high school together, 7, 8.
Oh, I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
I'll back up even a little bit more. So there's different ways to look at classifying schools. So there's elementary, middle/junior, and then there's high school. That's kind of how the state classifies schools, is into one of those 3 buckets. It's not as simple as that, but that is a classification that you'll see utilized by the state when they're looking at enrollments, when they're looking at how they define grade spans, how they do different things like that. So a combo school, and that's just a made-up term for myself for simplicity's sake, is a school that's going to have multiple of those kind of spans in it. It might have middle and high school within it, right? So that an example of a school like that would be a school with grades 7 and 8, which would fall under that middle umbrella, and then 9 and 12, which would fall under that high school umbrella, right? There's 22 schools that have some sort of combination of, maybe it's elementary and high school, maybe it's elementary middle high school, something like that with it. Excluded in that, and this was a personal thing, that I excluded any schools in which the combo involved just preschool or just kindergarten. For example, Bow High, where I just left, It's a 9 through 12 school. The preschool for the district is contained in the high school. I feel that's irrelevant to the discussion that we're having, so I'm not gonna go down the road to ask questions why that. If we were considering as a district to put preschool up in the high school, that's a different conversation. It's not the conversation we are having right now, so just for simplicity's sake. So there's 22 schools there. Of those 22, there's 19 that have some sort of middle and high school as the two things that are being combined. So focusing in on those kind of 3 schools, I've reached out to every single one of those school districts, either through a superintendent or a principal in that district, or in the case of Bedford, my wife, because she has worked there since the high school has opened and is as knowledgeable about that building as anyone else. So, and then just started gathering some information about each of their situations and how they handle the middle and the high school kind of together. So that's where I'm at right now. Starting to put a little chart together, different X's and non-X's. So
Do you wanna, do you have information that you wanna like share from what you've gleaned
I mean,
so far, or? I just,
yeah.
I'm wondering, it might help then when we start talking to Kyle, he's kind of aware
Yeah.
of where we're.
Can I specify, like on the Bedford too, is that in the same bucket as everyone else? Because it's a single building, but 2 kind of distinct schools.
Yep.
That's
So
the same
that's
as
included
a
in
7
there.
through 12.
Yeah,
That's all,
so-
okay.
And like the when you look at the official list from the state, from DOE of how they list schools and stuff like that, it's Lergio and then the high school for Bedford. They're on the same address. So that's kind of the indicator on whether or not they're the same school, one of these
Yeah.
combination schools, do they share an address?
But
Those
would that
two-
just mean they're on the same campus in separate buildings?
So that's a good question. So and I did not include ones that are on the same campus. So they might be, say, 1 Main Street and then 5 Main Street, and there's a clear divide into the buildings. Like you can actually, a lot of these, you have to dig into the website, go to Google Maps, and you can see the physical split. Bedford is not physically split, the 2 are still attached. So like that, I included it in this thing. Bedford is an incredible outlier though, of this entire situation. Because of the size, first of all, it is at least 3 times as big as any other school on this list, maybe even larger. I don't think they're the one we want to pay a lot of attention to. And so far from the people that I've spoken to or from the research I've been able to find going through their student handbooks or websites and stuff like that, they're literally the only school that does completely separate the 2 kind of middle school and the high school away from each other. Like there's literally a door down the middle that splits them apart from each other. So they're gonna, now that may not be the only school. I haven't heard back from all 19 yet, but that is the only one where that is the case so far. Of the ones that I've heard back from, I'd say it's probably about 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The recurring theme is that, and this is not true for all 9 of them, this is just a generalization for the majority of them, is that the core classes for the middle school and the high schoolers are separated. And when we say core classes, we mean English, social studies, math, and science. Now each district might have a little tweak on what their core is, maybe they include world language, maybe they don't, something like that. When we talk core, we're talking those 4 subject areas.
Is it separated by grade, you mean?
Separated by middle and separated by high school.
Okay.
So, and more often than not, it sounds like, because these are all smaller schools, is there is a hallway dedicated to the middle school core classrooms. That's kind of the recurring thing. So this hallway, whether it's the first floor, second floor, or just the first floor, whatever the case may be. From there, the vast majority, all of the, we'll classify them as unified arts, but your art classes, music, PE, and then additional services, nursing, counseling, so on and so forth, administration, are all shared by the 2 schools, right? So they're sharing the gym space, they're sharing the cafeteria space. And not only are they sharing that space, they're sharing the teachers in those, in the unified arts. Where in those core classes, the majority, not all, but the majority are that there are teachers for middle school core classes and then teachers for high school core classes, and they don't mix, but the unified arts will mix. Yep.
But they're not mixed classes, you don't have
They're not mixed
7-year-olds
classes.
with
No one's
balls.
mixing classes. There's a clear designation from that.
Is that all schools? Because I know our school does have a situation where we have 8th and 9th graders taking biology.
That's not all. I'm talking majority.
Right.
There's little differences.
Because it
for
depends on
everything.
schedules, like an advanced 8th grader might be taking classes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he's only talked, you just walked in, so he's only talked to 9, there,
Okay.
he identified 19?
Yep.
And I don't know, does that include charters?
It does not, so I've excluded
Okay.
charters just for this, at this point, because charters can be, they have all sorts of unique configurations and setups and everything else, so in terms of looking from a like,
Traditional to traditional.
yeah, just trying to focus in on that. We can expand to that, but we gotta start somewhere,
Right.
and this is a little bit more practical. The other big kind of thing that's interesting, so that was kind of core classes unified, both with the teachers. Everyone's sharing spaces with the exception of Bedford, and they still share an auditorium. But they share gyms, they share all those common spaces,
Cafeterias.
libraries, yeah, cafeterias, all that stuff. They're not necessarily eating lunch at the same time, in fact, no
Right.
one's eating lunch at the same time, but they share the space.
Did you happen to ask any of them, like with respect to lunch, are they like having kids eating lunch at like 9:30 in the morning? 'Cause
No,
they're-
but it's not out of the ordinary for lunches to start in schools at 10:30. You know, and that's true of whether you have these type of schools or you have normal schools. It's very dependent on the size of your
I mean, I think-
cafeterias.
What
so.
time's GMS's first lunch? 10:45?
10:45 to 1:45 is
Yeah.
our lunch period.
When I was at Timberlane, we had to run 4 or 5 classes depending, or 4 or 5 lunches depending on the year. And we would have to start them at like 10:40, you know, to get them all in, and they would end by 1 o'clock, because there's a ton of different things that go into lunch scheduling and teacher coverage and all that type of stuff. The other, like, I think is interesting, is bell schedules, and who does same bell schedules and who does different bell schedules for the two kind of age groups. The majority do different bell schedules, so the kids aren't interacting at passing times, but that's not true of all of the schools.
So how do they do that? Do they have two different tones? Like,
I didn't get into that level of detail
that's
yet,
interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
so that is one way of handling the concern.
or you don't do a tone, like, so,
Yes, we have that one right now. We had that one. It doesn't always
Yeah.
work well.
I think it depends on your culture,
Yeah.
like, I've tried it out in different schools and mixed results.
And it also depends on the student body of that
Yeah.
year. Some years it
Yeah.
works better than others.
Yes, it does. So that was interesting that. So this isn't a complete deep dive yet, this is a preliminary kind of conversation.
Hey guys, Jen's got a question online.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, Jen?
Hey, sorry, not a question, just wanted to say, we don't use ring bells now in the middle school at all. They just transition based on their schedule, because we found the bells, when there were all different schedules, is super disruptive to learning. So they just go on clock time, not bell time. Only start and end times.
That makes it easy.
If
Unless one
you,
teacher's clock is running a few minutes fast
Yeah.
or slow.
the last little piece of this is again, Bedford's an outlier, like the size of it and everything set up for it
It's a
is
much newer
completely
building
different.
too than a lot of them.
Yeah, and it's a complete outlier when you compare all of it. I'm not saying it's a pro or con, this is just fact.
Right.
We would be the third, excluding Bedford, we would be the third biggest school to do this. Like if you look at it.
Based on current numbers though.
Based on current numbers, yeah. So Sanborn would be bigger than us by a good chunk. Their high school is at 448 right now. They have 6 through 8 and they have 251 in there for their middle school. And then Monadnock's bigger.
I'm sorry, what was it, what was the figures from Sanborn?
Yep, 448 for high school, 251 for middle school. This is based on October 1st enrollments.
And so is there a middle school, so it's 6 through, what is it?
6 through 8, yep.
And that's in the same building?
Yep.
Okay,
All these are in the same building, like they're,
all right.
So they have 6 through 12 in the same
they
building?
do, yep.
And we're looking at 7 through.
Yeah, and there's a
Alright.
mix. A lot of them are 7 through 12, 6 through 12. and
But they're
stuff like that.
separated in those cases.
So in that space, I knew the principal, I worked with her years ago, when she was teaching at Timberlane. And they have a hallway dedicated for their middle school students, where all their core classes are, and then they have 2 different bell schedules for the day. So there's like a middle school bell schedule and then like a high school bell schedule. There is, they interact during, before and after school, because everyone's coming in the building the same. But they're not interacting at lunch or passing times or stuff like that. They share some unified art teachers, not as much as some of the smaller schools, like they don't share quite the volume of unified art teachers as some of the smaller ones do. And that's something that was a byproduct of the roof collapsing at their middle school and not being able to use their middle school anymore. But they are gonna keep it and have the kids up there kind of moving forward and stuff like that, so.
That's actually a good point. So did you happen to ask, or do you know how many of these were designed for that purpose, or how many were retrofitted for that purpose?
I didn't get into that level of detail.
Okay.
If I talk to people, like we had conversations just where we touched on it. Like I know the Newmarket superintendent, he was my principal at one point. And they shifted to that a long time ago, but the building was originally the high school, and eventually, because of enrollment, they shifted the middle school up there. It was fascinating. They have different bell schedules right now, but he's like, they don't like it, and they're gonna actually put everyone on the same bell schedule next year, which is different than a lot of other people that I was speaking to. Monadnock has had it that way. I mean, my dad coached football and taught in that school district his whole career. So for at least 40 years, they've been a junior/high school there. You know, that's forever, that format there. In that building, they have separate wings. Like, I can picture it fairly well from being in that building a lot as a kid. Yeah, and then Monadnock is the other one that would be bigger than Campbell. They have about 449 kids in the high school right now, 249 in their middle school. They're 7 through 12. The rest of them are all smaller, using sports as an indicator. Division 4 schools we're talking about, so there's schools that are smaller than 300 kids primarily. A lot of them are in the hundreds, and I'm talking high school enrollment.
So does that usually determine they don't typically have middle school sports because they're smaller?
Nope, they still have middle school
And
sports.
so are those 7th and 8th graders moving down or going to the other school to?
More often, they're just completely separate, right? They have 7th and 8th grade teams, or 6th through 8 teams, and then your high school teams are always 9th. They're always separate. I
And
shouldn't
at
say
that
most.
small, they're finding they have enough players to field teams like that?
Well, I don't know. Like, a couple of things that I came across was like them having to cancel basketball games for the middle school because they didn't have enough players. That was literally on someone's news announcements on their website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, we're canceling this game versus so and so for lack of players. You know, so
Jen has a question, or her hand raised.
Yeah. So just while you're on the topic of sports, I was doing some investigating through Tri-County, which is the league that the middle schools operate in. It's different than NHIAA. And the rules are that the kids have to all attend the same school. So if we split 5, 6 in one building and 7, 8 in a different building, we could no longer have a 5, 8 team. It would have to be just a 6th grade team, because 5th grade is technically not allowed to regularly participate as a sole group when you're competing against 8th graders, or a 7th, 8th grade team, and it might change our division as well.
I mean, those are like the kind of nitty gritty details you have to like go start making decisions and start doing stuff around and start finding information about. This one just hit home to me, and maybe the person I was familiar with some issues I've had in the past with libraries. But you know, one of the principals was like, you better be careful of your library if you go 7-12 and what's in that library, and just be very conscious of that. So.
What's in that library, or who's in that library?
What is in the library, like the reading materials and stuff like that, because what's in a middle school library is going to be
So
different than the high school library and stuff like that, so on and so forth. So that's just a preliminary discussions. I'm going to keep looking at this type of stuff. I think the big pull-aways for me was everyone said you have to keep, in their opinion, right, like you got to keep the core classes separated at a minimum. Like you Unified Arts, you're not going to be able to pull it off, but again, I'm talking to smaller schools primarily. But every single superintendent or principal I talked to said they went out of their way to keep the core classes separated. And most, but not all, like I said, the new market is going towards the same bell schedule for everyone next year. But most recommended having different bell schedules for the 2 different age groups. So.
Awesome. So that's just a little bit of information that Brian's found out. I thought, though, that it would be really helpful because, you know, when we think about what our buildings are and what might need to be done with them, Kyle has actually looked at that. So it's one of the like 40 different options that we examined. Kyle did look at that. And so I wanted to have him come in and kind of talk a little bit more about what he looked at, what some of the considerations were, and just, you know, keeping in mind that we recognize that you had like a certain like marching orders, right? So, you know, I just want you to be cognizant of the fact that we are removing all of those marching orders, and we're going to develop the marching orders as we sort of discuss things. So, for example, you know, you just heard today, I know like one of the things that we had talked about was like really true full segregation of middle school and high school. You know, I think that some of the feedback we've gotten is that that might be where the town would prefer to see it go if that was the case, but at this time, we're not making assumptions on that. We're just talking about what our...
It's good to hear all that.
it's good to hear that you're lifting the restrictions and things of that nature. And that's one of the things that, since you and I talked on the phone, that I kind of want to bring up before we get into the building, the details, that there's basically the educational specs that I responded to way back when we first started this are very different than what the tone is today, and that's why you're saying we're lifting those restrictions. Educational specifications are essentially the directive that the district gives an architect. And what's happened, I think, is that in absence of good ed specs, I've been making suggestions based on my experiences, but my experiences aren't necessarily your experiences or what your needs and wants are. And that made me realize that I'm not listening to you folks well enough, that we need to figure out a way that I can ask better questions such that I get the answers of what your needs are, and that way we can steer this whole conversation in a direction that's more productive. The thing that stood out to me the most was what you just talked about, that when you and I were on the phone, I'd always assumed that every school would want that separation, because that's what I've been told by multiple districts in the past. I did the original programming on the Bedford Middle High School, and that's why it's separated like that, because they came back and said it has to be completely separated, so we designed it in. I was hired by the diocese to do an addition to Trinity High School in Manchester to bring over 7th and 8th grade. So that's a 7 through 12. You come in the front doors, middle school's left, high school's right, and they only touch in a couple of places, art and music and the gym. There's 2 separate cafeterias with a kitchen in the middle. And we took a lot of effort to make sure that things were separated, because that's what the parents told the administration what they wanted. Lastly, I've been working with the Monadnock district for a long time now. We're doing additions, renovations to all the elementary schools, but I've done an addition and a renovation to the high school, so I kind of know the layout pretty well. And in preparation of coming here, I'd asked Jeremy Rathman what he thought about the setup in the middle high school, and he says it's a disaster. He doesn't like it. And the reason is that there is wings that are middle school and wings that are high school, but there's one entrance, and pretty much the connecting quarters are all shared. Basically, you've got like a middle school wing that just turns into a high school wing, and there's a lot of crossing of the 2 schools. If he had his druthers, he'd take a step back. We've actually talked about doing a study to see some way that we could do a separate entrance and try to get the 2 schools a little bit more separated. So anyways, long-winded way of saying, I came to this discussion with a preconceived idea of what you would want, and I could be wrong about that. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing the research to figure out what Litchfield needs, as opposed to what maybe everybody else is doing.
And just so you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, please jump in, but the driving force behind our desire to really dig into this is utilization, right? So
Yeah, right.
we have debates over what we think is gonna happen in terms of enrollment, but at the present time, we are not utilizing the building to, its fullest capacity, and so we wanna at least be able to evaluate what that would look like if we tried to.
So it's a good segue into talking about the specifics of your plans. I'm not talking about, only talking in very broad generalities about possibilities of additions and things of that nature. But again, back to the educational specs, there needs to be a clear directive on certain educational portions of it. I don't want to be the one dictating what the education would be and say the high school wings. For example, this is not high school, it's an elementary school. Just 2 months ago, I was at a district that's looking to do a new elementary school, 100 students per grade, like a carbon copy of what you folks have looked at in the past. And I presented a program that included 5 classrooms per grade. And then the chair of the school board, who's the chair of the committee, turns to me and says, "Why not 6?" I'm like, "Well, because that's what the enrollment support." And he said, no, we have a policy, a hard cap at 18 students per classroom. And divide by 100, you need 6 classes. So again, I walked into a situation where I made an assumption and realized after the fact that I was wrong. So I'm being a little bit more careful about not stepping on those landmines. So getting more feedback in those areas, and you might need the correct questions from me in order to answer that. Keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, make a mental or even an actual note. All right, this question needs to be answered, because I might be asking you rather than you asking me how to do that. All right, so let me share my screen.
Can we turn on the other TVs? Awesome.
Okay. All right, so when was this? This was 2 or 3 years ago.
Are we supposed to read that? Are we supposed to be able to read that?
Zoom in.
Are you able to plug into these? Is there?
You don't really need to read this. You just need to know what it is. Basically, 2 or 3 years ago, when we were going through these different options, this option, the idea of moving 7th and 8th grade up to high school was brought up before. I've made a couple presentations on it. But again, things are different, and the background might be different. What this is a list that I got from the principal, which is all the rooms, and, oh, this is the middle school. We get to high school. I got it in reverse. These are all the rooms with the periods. It's actually, it looks like it's 9 periods, it's actually 5. And you'll see, this is a worksheet that I put together based on their utilization of the rooms. And you can see that most rooms are used somewhere, what's the average there? Probably, 3.5 periods a day out of 5. So that ends up being a 70% or 75% utilization rate of rooms. That's interesting.
Does that include, is that only for classroom periods, or is that for like staff work, prep periods?
This is when kids are in the room.
When kids are in the room, okay.
When kids are in the room. Well, what that immediately tells me, though, is a typical high school runs at a utilization rate of about 75%. That's what you're running at.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that there's extra capacity, so where's the extra capacity? My guess, I don't know, because I didn't get the actual number of kids per section, per room.
Right.
That what you could fit in there at 25 students is not what's in there. It's probably more like 18 or 19 students per class.
But the other question would be, do you have all of the classrooms, or only the classrooms used for students? Because
No, these are all of them.
So even the rooms that were classrooms but may now be used for something else?
How long ago was this information?
A couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, so it could be that there's more. There could be that there's a change in it, but at the time, it was the assumption was that there was empty classrooms.
Right.
And what I discovered is that there wasn't. There was just underutilized classrooms.
Right.
So the challenge here, and this is where I started asking the questions, is if you were to free up classrooms, how would you do that? There could be classrooms that are, say, like an AP science, or a better example might be an AP English class that only has 6 or 8 students in it.
Do we have 6 or 8 student classrooms now? We have 6 or 8 student classes now?
I'm making
Well,
an
if it's an
example.
just
AP
asking,
where it's,
do we?
then we're not gonna.
He didn't get the actual numbers.
I didn't get the actual numbers.
Of how many were in each.
So what I was saying here is that this is what the classroom could handle, but based on the total number of students, if you divide it evenly, would only come out to about 19. So I'm assuming that there's some classes that might be 20 to 25, there might be other classes that are 10 to 15. There could be something as low as 10 or below, based on if there's an AP or an advanced placement program that only a few students sign up for. So what the challenge is for the administration is to say, all right, if we're not utilizing the high school to the maximum, how do we combine some of these rooms where there's some empty spaces without really disrupting the program? If you've got like an AP math and an AP English, can they share the same room and therefore maybe utilize the space better? Teachers don't like that. It's a little bit more of a struggle with scheduling and just the administration, but it's possible.
Kyle, you're talking about, when you say share, not two classes going on in the same room at the same time.
No,
Well, no,
just
but,
teachers not having their own classroom.
right,
Well,
exactly.
we've talked about that being an assumption anyway.
Yeah.
But it does bring up the idea of, all right, what if you have, say, an AP English that's talks about Shakespeare and an AP English that talks about creative writing? Maybe you combine those two into one class and they do Shakespeare for the first half and writing for the second half. Again, that's an educational thing. My question to the administration then, is there any way of doing that in a way that doesn't hurt the education but frees up some room? Because right now, unless things have changed, there's not a lot of just plain empty classrooms. There's a lot of empty sections. There's a lot of empty periods of the day, but not empty classrooms altogether.
Well, Carrie raised a good point too, which is that's not, we're talking about students in classrooms. We also have to factor in like planning and stuff like that, if there's other spaces to be utilized for that. I don't know the answer to that.
Again, the utilization rate is important because you don't want to be 100%, because then it makes it impossible to do scheduling. So we typically design a new school, a high school at 75% utilization, middle school at say 85, and an elementary school at 90, because at elementary schools they don't move around a whole lot.
So at 70%, we're not that far off. We're not that underutilized.
Again, it's not the utilization of the rooms, it's the number of students in the rooms.
But 70 versus 75 is pretty
No,
darn
it's not that much off. That's what I was saying. This is what I presented a couple of years ago, is that the utilization of the building is actually pretty
So,
average.
What is, if I look at some of these, I see ones and 0.5s. So I'm assuming A through H are the various periods.
Oh, the 0.5 is when it's only for one semester.
All right, so sure, we have a lot, so that means that there are a lot of empty spaces throughout the day. So if I'm looking at a class that's half a semester, then that means the following semester, it's also
Right, so like this classroom here,
it's full all year.
occupied 2.5 periods a day. So two periods for one semester, 3 periods for another semester.
Out of 8 periods?
5.
5 periods, it's still half.
Yeah.
So that's less than 70.
Yeah. So the idea is if you've got two that are, 2.5%, and you
Right.
combine those two.
Right.
I don't know. It's a question for administration.
I mean, as we've talked about, there's a ton of variables to this, right? Like, for example, a fax classroom, like the cooking classroom, right? We're not gonna teach math out of the fax classroom. So
Right.
anytime that classroom is not being used for fax, it's gonna be empty, right? So different rooms have different levels of involvement. Some of your rooms, like a humanities-based classroom, you're gonna use the rest, like, all day. You're gonna have English and social studies classes probably in it the entire day. And you can really utilize that class completely. For some of these specialized courses, you're just not gonna be able to put other things in it within reason. I mean, if you're desperate, you'll do anything, right? But just like, if we're talking best practice, you don't want to stick a math class in a fax class, for example.
When you can't stick certain things into like a chemistry class.
You can, well, again, if you're desperate, you can do anything. But
Right.
yes, like usually your science classrooms, you want to make them exclusive to science classrooms, especially lab-based classrooms. If you using chemistry as an example, because you brought that up, that was, I'm going to talk about Bo for a second because that's where I was the principal. No other class was in the chemistry classroom except for chemistry, because if labs were set up for the chemistry class, we didn't want anyone to touch them, right? So if that's just a safety thing. So that meant that room was not utilized 3 periods of the day, or 3 blocks over 2 days, right?
But there's ways you can address that. Like, we're looking at having special lab spaces and separate lecture spaces.
All
So
schools
there's
do different
there's
creative
different
things,
ways
yeah.
of addressing it so that you can more utilize your space.
Yeah, and using both, for example, that classroom wasn't touched, but other science classrooms were.
Right.
So like, for example, the bio room, because a lab for bio is mainly cleaning.
Right.
Like, you're gonna have dirt, you're gonna have different things. And that's just a cleaning mechanism more than a safety with some of the chemicals involved. You would have bio, you have physical science, you would have a ton of different things out of that room, and it would be utilized all day.
We got a couple hands raised up here. Good. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I was gonna say, Jen can go first, but,
You're already talking, so just keep talking.
okay. I guess we've already gone over capacity and utilization and the need to probably shift schedules around. I thought we were gonna be looking at what is the physical changes that needs to happen if we did a redistribution.
Well, I think we're recapping on this because I think that this plays into what are the physical changes that have to happen, right?
I can't come up with the size of a project if I don't know how many classrooms I can fit into the building.
But I also think this is outdated, because didn't we reduce the number of computer rooms from 3 to like 2?
We just, it's a few years old.
Yeah.
And
So,
does that include
Schedule's different, the classroom utilization.
moving the SAU out of here?
This is just
Yeah, I'm sure that does.
existing,
Okay.
what the classrooms were.
All right.
I'm guessing, and Jake, I don't even know if Jake was here for this.
No.
Yeah. I'm guessing this is, the teacher period is the classification of the room, because each room is classified as something, right?
Right.
Like, there are computer rooms that are classified as computer rooms, but they no longer have computers in them, right? They're a regular classroom at this point. And this is where that list kind of comes from. So just because it's listed as foreign language there, that doesn't necessarily mean, it could be, I just don't know, no, we weren't here when it was.
I was
but-
given the room
Yeah.
number and the teacher's name. I didn't know anything else other than that, so I looked at the plan to see what was designated when it was
Can
designated.
I make an observation then? It seems that this is somewhat useless.
I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, no, it is, because it doesn't represent the
So-
current situation,
So
right?
we're having a preliminary conversation about what additional information that we need to get to be able to evaluate this option.
So what I said a few
But the
minutes
point
ago-
being is, I agree with you, if that was updated and current, then.
So-
But it's showing that right now, or at this point, we were at 75% utilization, which is where you want to be. There might be fewer kids there, but you're still going to tie up rooms, even if there are fewer kids in those rooms.
Now, I want to get back to some of the physical stuff,
Hold on,
but this is.
one
yeah.
second. Jen has had her hand up for like an hour.
No, we're not quite an hour. I'm good. The conversation is exactly kind of going in the direction I was going to say. We lived the utilization where we were at almost 100% of available rooms and spaces at LMS when we were going through the construction process. The one thing that isn't indicated in any of this conversation is needing a significant space for a landing place for teachers, because no one will have a class that they can
Right.
occupy when they're not teaching.
well, do they currently have offices? Do teachers currently have an office?
No.
Okay.
So some schools do this, and every school is unique when I say these things. At Timberlane, for example, all teachers share classrooms all day long, right? But each department had an office for all their teachers. So you might have 10 teachers in a particular, like science is the one that pops in my head, right? We had 10 or 12 teachers in the science department at that school, right? And they all had a desk in this room that was either a converted classroom or converted something into that space, right? Because that school grew over time, and they had to no longer have their own classroom, but you do need that space. Now, so you gotta factor that in at some point. Like, if you're gonna bump people into the same rooms, that's great, but where are those people gonna go when they're not teaching? Now, Camp Bliss have a good-sized teacher's room and stuff like that. Now, is that enough? You don't know. You gotta start putting pieces together and stuff like that. And so I don't wanna there's other
No.
educational stuff, but we should stay on physical.
But it would be interesting to see what it is in today's utilization, because let's face, class sizes at the high school are down from when we did this.
Yeah,
But
There
that's-
have been changes, so I think it's useful to see what is available at this time, but it'd be interesting to know what's available based on
Yeah.
today's schedule.
And I don't wanna go down educational components yet.
Right.
We're here with Kyle, we got limited time.
No,
to talk
I
about
know, but
physical
so I
stuff.
like the idea, I would be interested in seeing it updated, that's all I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah,
But
no,
just
we
one-
absolutely, that's, again, for me, like, so here's like a question that I have, right?
Yeah.
So, when we talk about bringing in 7th and 8th, obviously we would have to figure out how to handle the high school, right? Because right now, above the I've never actually walked through the entire high school, believe it or not.
We did a tour. Where were you?
I was not there. Above the SAU is all classrooms, right?
Yeah, I think it's
So,
just
so ultimately, like, let's just say for, assumption purposes, that's the area, if we were trying to bring 7th and 8th and we were clearing the SAU out of there, I would imagine that would be the area that we would have to start thinking about reallocating and trying to figure
But,
out
yeah.
how to take.
Sounds like you would be looking for 8 core classrooms then.
I think
4 for
eight's
each
the
of the
magic
two.
number,
Yeah.
right? Like 4 and 4 for that.
And the rest of them you can
And then-
potentially filter into other classes, and into other classrooms.
Yeah, and be strategic, like if you were to do it, you know, like I think you're starting with a minimum of 8, but 8 would be my target for that. And then when you start expanding out into your unified arts, making sure some of the bridge arts are closer to that hallway where their room is than others. Like world language is the one that pops in my head.
Right.
I would make the first room out of the middle school wing be a world language room
That makes
because
sense.
then you're not wandering them off
Right.
down the hallway to the deep corners of the school
Right.
to do stuff.
Brian, the other class that isn't being mentioned is special services. There would have
Yeah.
to be a place for that service to be delivered.
Correct. And the other thing, just again, I don't want to go down the educational route because there's a whole rabbit hole there and we should focus on facilities. But when we talk about small class sizes, and this is like a huge like academic thing, educational thing that I think would have to be on the table if you were to go down this road, and you would have to really talk to a community about it. Right now, the high school tracks classes, they level classes. And that is not the sole reason why there are smaller class sizes, but it certainly contributes to smaller class sizes, right? Because if you're leveling an honor, I don't know what we even call them, but an honors, a college prep, and then like a remedial level, instead of having all those kids in one class, you're breaking them up into 3 classes. That, it sounds like, has been how Campbell High School's operated in its eternity, right?
Is that
I
how
don't
it
know if
operates
something-
now?
Yes.
What's that? Yeah.
That's how it operates now.
And I don't know if the town is passionate about that, if that's a deal breaker for the town, but if you're gonna tighten, if you're gonna expand the number of kids in a class, so you're freeing up classrooms, like you can't run a college prep algebra 1 and an honors algebra 1 at the same time anymore. You gotta just run it once, algebra 1. Now, that's a conversation to have. I actually don't like tracking personally, you know, that's not necessarily my belief system, so I can make that argument pretty well, but this isn't my community. I work in this community, I don't live in this community. My kiddo's not going to the school. You just, you know, like you gotta talk that through with your community if that's the direction they wanna head.
I have one comment and one question for Kyle. First comment is I'd be extremely concerned for the AP classes. There are some that are very limited in the number of kids.
What'd you say, Denise? I'm
I'd
sorry.
be very concerned about AP classes. Some of them are very limited with the number of kids, to the
Yeah.
point that some of the classes have been held in
I mean,
Alburn.
those are the
Well, I mean,
decisions
that's,
you have to
to me,
make.
that's,
Right.
that's a reasonable compromise, honestly. Alburn's not too far away, and if they don't have enough and we don't have enough, but together we have plenty,
But I want
why
to
wouldn't we
remind
do that?
people, we didn't have a teacher for AP chemistry. It had nothing to do with numbers, it had nothing to do with enrollment. And the 2 kids that took the course over there had a horrible experience and did not do well in the exam at all.
But-
So like, again, yes, it's an option. All of these things are options, but like,
But I'd also stress.
we can do anything.
I like
It
APs,
doesn't
but I
mean
don't
it's
know
the
if 2
right
students would-
idea.
Right,
Hey,
and
Greg?
right now,
I
we're
think
just
the
trying to get
community
a,
likes
I'm just
safety.
trying to get a grasp of
So parents
what
can
we
pay for
actually
it,
have
the
to
community may
consider.
not
Like,
want to.
that's all we're trying to achieve right now, is just get a grasp
Yeah.
of what are the different things that we need to be.
Let me answer your question.
Question
Absolutely.
is, you've looked at the plans. In your opinion, do you think there is room to keep 8 classes apart from the CHS high school students as it currently
This
is?
whole page is all about asking you the question. Can you condense some of these? Can the administration condense some of these to create some open classrooms? And then I can start looking
Right.
at how that
So I
fits in.
think, yeah, this needs to be updated because the enrollment's lower. Your classes in the high school are now what, arriving at what, 80, 85? No more than 90. for
Yeah,
high
I
school
would assume
courses.
between 80 and 90 is what you would plan for.
So, is that 4 English classes, or is that 3? You know, you don't wanna do 3 because that's not
Yeah.
30. So 4 English classes, how could you level 4 English classes? Like, I know when I went to school, my honors, I took all honors, there were 28 kids in my class. We all tracked together. We all went to the honors English, we all went to honors social studies, we went together. There was we had,
I'm right, I know, I don't.
then we had we had honors regents and then the, I don't remember what they called it, general diploma. So but we had 100, well, actually we started with 140 kids. We did not have, 18, 16 kids in a class. So what is reasonable? Like if we have 80 to 90 kids, is a 4 English classes sufficient.
Yeah, and I think that's things you gotta talk about in a bigger picture, right?
Right.
Like, and I think you're gonna have different opinions and.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, again, I wanna stay away from that discussion right now and focus on the facility side of things.
Right.
Because I think you will just have a lot of discussion on what that is and what appropriate class size for high school classes. There's instances where I think you can go high in class sizes.
Right.
When I taught algebra 2, I didn't mind classes of 24, 25
Right.
kids.
But a
When I
science class,
taught
you wouldn't.
My algebra 1 classes, I wanted classes of 16 or 18 because they're younger kids and I'm trying to teach them skill sets and stuff. But that's a whole other discussion and I wanna stay.
All that
so-
is not architectural related.
No,
It's
but what
all
it does
education.
factor is if we update this, we can start thinking of like, oh, well, if there are
And-
17 kids in this class, well, I can consolidate.
The
So-
reason why I put it up
Yep.
here
I like it.
was to get people to talk about
So-
it,
No,
not
I like
to
it.
say that this is
If
the
I
actual.
can ask a facility related question,
Yeah.
so, I'm looking for help to phrase this question, cause maybe this is the direction that we kinda need to go. If people can visualize Campbell High School in their head right now, and you think about the hallway where the SAU is and the hallway above it, there's not 8 classrooms currently there, because the SAU is there, there's nurse's office, administrative offices, and different things, right? I think what we're looking for and how do we get this is what would be costs associated with taking, for example, that wing and ensuring there's 8 classrooms and other things in there, you know, special ed spaces, these other things to make sure that our
Move you to the 1930s
kids-
building.
No, we're talking.
We're not worried about that.
Talking Campbell.
We
We're talking
don't care where he
Campbell.
goes.
No, but I'm saying if you move a bunch of those classes.
I'm not worried about the SAU,
No, we
but
just-
like you still have to do
How much,
stuff,
what can
right?
you do
still
to that
have
SAU
to do
space,
stuff,
right? How many,
Yeah.
you got the SAU space, it takes up X square footage, what can you do?
Because I
with it?
think where I currently
Extend the
am,
hallway.
you knock down the like wall that was built, the like not concrete wall, I think you can get maybe a smaller classroom. The other side of the SAU, you're knocking down concrete to get to a classroom.
But the building was designed to receive an addition in the future. So my
Sure.
question would be,
We're gonna get
what,
to that.
what did
Yeah,
that look
so-
like?
It's to connect the halls.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to
Alright.
that. Well, in a very broad term.
Because
Very broad
I
term.
moved to town after CHS was built, and but after all that conversation, but I do know that there were plans for a future addition.
Yeah, it's to
So-
connect the hallways, because every school built in this age range is the same thing at Bow. They have the 2 wings, and then there's a plan in place, it's buried, I'm sure, because it was buried in Bow.
But how many
that
classrooms would
connects.
that have added?
Probably 10.
Let's continue, so.
Well,
guys, I
does
think we're
anybody,
gonna cover-
Rich, do you know?
Oh my God.
Or Marilyn, do you know
Let's go back a ways.
what the addition future
The
was?
future date, well, I mean, the enrollment projections weren't to the point where you could decide how big that addition would be. It was really conceptual, it was, same thing we did at the middle school, right? So when we closed, because the middle school's the same way.
We closed it
Corridor
up.
with 2 wings, and we added the 4th to connect the hallways, that was 9 classrooms. And they're roughly similar, but there was never a conversation to say, oh, well, down the road, we're gonna add
Okay.
10 classrooms.
And that addition created a courtyard.
Right.
Right.
So, I did want to answer one question that came up a few minutes ago, and I think it's germane to what we were just talking about. That once you develop that list of sections, numbers of students, that kind of stuff, we can look at some of those classes, some of the AP classes, or maybe some of the bigger classes and say, all right, we're not going to have just all 900 square foot classrooms. We could take a 900 square foot classroom, put a wall down the middle, and have 2 small group rooms that could have 2 AP courses going at the same time within the same amount of space. Or, on the other hand, we could create, say, like a lecture space, where you might have 2 classes coming in for, a period of time. So there's, having that flexibility is a way that an architect can kind of make that program fit in the most efficient way.
See, that's where I would be a little nervous
Yeah.
when we talk physical space. Because if you do that with, like, say you have, all right, we have an AP stats class with 9 kids and an AP calc class with 8 kids, just using math as an example. Hey, we'll take this classroom, split it in half and do an 8-kid class, 9-kid. That's one period. What about the other 3 blocks of the day? Right, like, you
Divided.
wanna have the ability to put full classes in that classroom. You have to be uber careful to split classrooms, because once you make that split, you're confining
But
them to
it
that
sounds
small
like that's something that we would have to really update this, look at that, and
But
then
it's
say.
also so,
project
but
out
it's also
what it
so
looks like.
different from every year. We had 29 kids take AP Stats last year. This year we have 11. So like, from year to year it changes so much. You start making these
Yeah.
like, oh well, this year that makes sense. are we every year just running into
But that-
new problems
Yeah,
of like, I don't even wanna begin to tell you guys what a building a
Okay.
But
master
I think that
schedule
refers
is.
to the keeping it at 75, 80% utilization, right? It gives you that flexibility year over year to adjust.
Correct, but you gotta be careful about smaller classrooms. Like in Bow, they have a number of smaller classrooms. They are useless. They are
Right.
useless spaces, right? Because we don't have classes that size all day long. You might be able to dump one class in there.
But there are ways of doing it.
And
They
that-
have
and
those
that-
dividers
yeah,
you can
folding
close and
dividers.
open.
I think
So
it's a
I was gonna
matter
say, make them
of working the
flexible.
statistics, so if, like, I just finished the Trinity High School edition.
In fact, you got them in there now.
For 700 students, I think we've got 4 small group classrooms. So it's not a whole lot, but it gives them that little bit of flexibility that they can use that. One of them, they plan on using it as a conference room in certain periods, because when they have, say, colleges come in and want to do a presentation, they need something bigger than a small conference room. So there's other flexibility that we can build in.
And that's great, but you gotta be careful, you
Yeah.
don't box yourself in. And like, you can't use those rooms in future years as different course offerings change, as your school like goes up and down over different years. Because it is really like a handful of kids in a particular class, if they have an interest in something. Jake's example of AP Stats is right there. 29 kids in AP Stats, that's 2 classes. 11 kids, that's 1, right? Like.
So if we're
those-
looking at updating these numbers, it would be, it's definitely relevant to say, like, yeah, this class, only had this for this year, but that has fluctuated up to whatever, depending on the enrollment in that class.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to look at this, but
Look
they're
at the
all
statistics
projections and
and see.
variables, right? Like,
You would have to look over, like, to plan this right, you would have to look your historic over years and like, what has it been in that class year over year? What's the average? And then we can kind of do a plan that may or may not fit.
and you gotta leave yourself room for when you build a master schedule, because you always run into conflict.
Right.
Like, you always run into conflict when you're scheduling classes, right? Where like, you might have, and APs is one of the more prominent places this butts heads, right? Because you can usually typically only offer one section of an AP class, and you have kids that are trying to get all of those sections, right? You just run out periods of the day. Those kids are typically, whereas making some assumptions, usually tied to music, right? So boom, there's a period that is stagnant, you can't move from, right? Usually kids will take an AP Math and AP Science, those are linked together. There's multiple sciences that are APs, right? So you gotta clear your AP Calc, clear it from your AP Physics, your AP Chem, your AP Bio, right? So boom, there's 5 periods all tied up right now already.
We're also a
Four.
CTE school, so we send kids away,
Correct.
so then
So
there's
there's
2 other
all these
blocks
button
that are
heads
automatically
against
butted
that.
up.
And I'm not saying any of this is impossible, but you just gotta be careful about boxing yourself in on some of this stuff when you look at the educational components of it.
So let's hear a
Does
little bit more.
does also the review of the curriculum play into this? Are we offering too many options?
I would argue that we need to expand some of our offerings, but that
But
is a whole
cut some
other-
out too?
What's that?
Cut some out?
We don't offer the same courses every year. We do a course request process every year. We
A course for
only-
what?
A course request process where students get to request and teachers request for them. And then we only run the courses that we can put in that.
And this is where you get into what you want out of your school.
So
right?
Let me just follow up on that. I know we're getting off topic, but I think it's important. Because I asked you about the curriculum, and I've gone through, and there's a lot of different offerings, and I know they're not run every
Yep.
time. But it seems to me that there's too wide a range of.
So
So
I'll answer
I
that
have-
question quick. I'll answer that question quick. We have to have sometimes certain numbers of offerings in certain areas, right? So that's part of why you see multiple offerings in some of those areas, right? That is mandated by law, that we have multiple offerings sometimes in different areas and
Correct.
stuff like that, right? A successful high school, and I think the goal is to have a successful high school, needs a variety in the courses that you offer. You're meeting a lot of different needs for kids. Classes come in and out of style, classes become in and out popular. You work to your educator's strengths and those type of things. You're gonna have a diverse number of course offerings. Personally, I would love to see us have more dual enrollment classes at Campbell High School, right? Because I
What's
think
that dual
where
enrollment?
you can get college credit and you can get high school
I
credit
really
at
have
the
to
same
pull
time.
this back right now because
Sorry.
we can have an entire conversation about this at our next meeting. Like we're getting some really good topics of conversation that we have to hash out that cross over into education.
You're right.
Yeah, go ahead. I will, because you were patient with your hand out.
I'll turn it back. So, if, in theory, what I've heard so far is that in order to do 7th and 8th, we have to find room for 8 classrooms in a location that would allow those 8 classrooms to be separated from the high school classrooms, right? I mean, I think that's a basic.
Separated-ish.
That's the request.
That's the basic. So if you look at the wing that has the SAU in it, you've got 6 classrooms on the second floor. So it means you would have to get an additional 2 classrooms plus special ed and art, or special ed and, what was the other thing you said needed to be closed? Oh, unified languages.
Well, I think
But they already
you
offer
take the
languages now,
corners
you
on
just have
some
to
of these
relocate
things.
them.
I think special ed needs to be in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of your, like, the gym's the gym, you're not gonna be able to change that, right?
Right.
The art room's the art room, you're not gonna change that, those are gonna stay stagnant, right?
Right.
Those type of unified arts are gonna be there.
Right.
But these kind of unified arts that are in more of a traditional classroom setting, my recommendation would be is it's not too far away from that wing, right? It doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, but like, you would teach Spanish out of a typical classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So make the first, like, if you think of the second floor, right, and you take the corner out of that hallway, I would say the first classroom you run into is Spanish, and then the next on across from it is like a business computers type of class, right? Those kind of common.
So,
So,
I got a
I mean,
question.
they
It's
still,
gonna pull
they're
back.
gonna have to go across to get
I got
music,
Ray,
they're gonna
too.
have to go down
They're
the
gonna
hall
have
to
to
get
go-
art and gym.
and I
They're
think
gonna have
this
to go
is
middle
why
of the school cafeteria, there's
a lo-
not, cause it's not built
It
as
sounds
a
like
core.
what a lot of schools are doing to minimize the interactions is running the 2 different bell schedules,
Right.
right? And there's probably some good educational thing. A lot of high schools run block schedules. Campbell runs block scheduling. Every school I've worked in has some variation of block scheduling, right? Where you're talking, you're in a classroom 80 to 90 minutes at the high school level, which is appropriate because you need to be in class for 80 or 90 minutes. Jen, do you think you could sit a middle school kid in the same classroom for 80 minutes?
That's a no.
No, so you're gonna have to do that differently.
all right, so,
So,
hold on one
but
second.
my question is,
17,
for Kyle, is that doable? I mean, if you
Well-
look at just
Well,
straight
so what you
square
asked me
footage.
is, if there's 6 classrooms on the second floor, all we need is another 2 classrooms, right? But those 6 classrooms are being used by the high school.
Right,
Where
no,
do they
this,
go?
we'd have to assume that we could get those 6
Right.
classrooms
So-
into.
And that's something that we
the
would have to
other
evaluate.
So let's-
And we're not
Let's
gonna
go
solve
through
that, I'm asking
this.
him, is it physically possible to get enough square feet?
To get 2 more classrooms
To
downstairs.
get 2 more
I think if I can get
classrooms
through the rest
plus
of the
whatever.
presentation, that would answer my
Matt?
question.
Okay,
Take Kenz's
thanks,
dinner.
cause I mean, you're here,
Look
I
at
wanna hear what.
That's what this is all
Right.
about.
All right,
I mean, I've.
right, real quick.
If we're gonna do something like that in addition to that school, if we do close up those hallways, you can get all the classrooms you need in that space and probably a lecture room, and keep the SAU in place, don't move it, and don't go through the cost of moving it, keep that right there, just close up those 2 hallways, 2 stories.
It's a much bigger project, right?
But
Like,
you're talking about-
It's a little bit bigger project, but I think it
Swear
would
to
be
God, if we
better
build on
results,
Campbell,
because
we're
now all the
gonna
kids
touch
can be in the same
Spending
place.
you tons of millions of dollars.
All right, yeah, guys, I'm gonna let you go in one second, but
Elements too.
we are jumping ahead, and I really just want him to be able to get through
Yeah,
the rest of
but
it, so.
can you, finish.
Go ahead, real
My
quick.
concern is now we're talking about a potential addition to Campbell, which
We haven't even
now-
gotten there yet, then.
Right.
No, but why are we even going there when we're trying to fix GMS?
Because,
Why not do an
because
addition to
one of the,
GMS?
because as we discussed, that there is a very popular opinion that 7th and 8th, increasing our utilization at the high school is more efficient for us, and it's going to be a lot less cost, so we have to hash that out, so that's what we're trying to do right now.
But you now touch on significant
We,
structure
I
in 2
understand
schools.
that, I understand that, but that's part of what we will discuss down the road as we talk about all the considerations of this plan.
Kyle, do
Right
you
now,
have, I'm sorry, I'm trying to help you out. Kyle, do you have more stuff to present?
yes, thank you.
So, just trying to help.
No, I appreciate it, because I'm supposed to leave right now, but I don't wanna leave yet, go.
Wow, you're
Talk
right,
fast.
you're right.
All right,
So-
my daughter's keeping busy.
So this next sheet is a way that an architect basically takes that program of spaces and turns it into the numbers of classrooms. I don't want to get into a lot of detail here, the kind of discussions we've been going through, but just to show you the kind of level that I usually get to in order to find out just how many classrooms we need. Because right now, everybody's asking, can you fit those classrooms in? How many classrooms? I don't even know because we haven't gotten through the education specs yet.
Right.
My question to you is, tell me how many classrooms we need, how many you can free up, and then I'll tell you if it can fit. So that's what this worksheet does, is basically tries to calculate the number of classrooms. I do it for the high school, and then I also do it for the middle school. This is just a rough shot of what I did, 2024, so about 6 months ago. The last time
Is it possible to zoom in on that slide, because it comes out really, really tiny?
You know what, we really don't need to be talking about the numbers on it, so I just wanted to show it as, this is the kind of work that we did in the past in order to calculate those numbers of classrooms that you need. We need to do this in a more connected way where I'm getting the feedback from the district, not me presenting the size and then telling you how many classrooms you need. So where that goes from there is, okay, let's look at the plans. Oh, wait a minute, the program of spaces. So once I get that information from the district, I plug it into how many actual classrooms you need, how many middle school classrooms you need. Actually, I came up with 8 or 9, you guys are saying 8.
Is this for GMS? Is this the GMS sheet?
No,
This is if,
I can't see it from here.
high school classrooms, middle school classrooms, high school science,
All
middle
right,
school science.
okay, thank you.
this
So is that total middle school or just the 7th and 8th grade?
The 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
And it could be inaccurate, because it's a couple of years old.
Yep.
And we don't have that input from the district on the educational specs. So this is how I come up with the total size of the building to understand if it's gonna fit or not. And basically where I was at 6 months ago was you need about, a 10,000 square foot addition. So we're not talking huge.
Right.
10,000 square feet, basically gonna cover that gap between what you can fit in and what doesn't fit in. But that's, again, just a hip shot guess. There's been a couple of times I've come to this committee and been asked very pointed questions, why is your numbers changing? Why is this cost different than the last time? And it's because I was doing that in a vacuum and not getting the correct feedback, and I want to correct that and make sure the next time around we do it with the correct feedback. So, moving on to the plan then. It was mentioned, well, it was designed for an addition. What I was told previously is that that addition was planned in the side of the building to the left towards the street. And basically, there's enough room to fit an addition in there. What I'm showing is the ability to actually connect from one wing to the next wing. So that way, the idea is, actually I'll do it better on here.
Don't make a courtyard.
How many
I
classrooms?
know, most people don't like courtyards. I don't even like
Honestly, you
courtyards.
could glass it out and make it like a green room house for the environmental science class.
I could show you some examples. I've done some courtyards lately that have actually worked out
I
well.
was expending more money than we
But
have to.
I want
essentially,
to shut down a school. This gets me that way.
what we've got is, I could, it's bigger, not too big.
That's 10,000 square feet?
No, it's just a.
Just a box.
A box, this potential area that addition could go. So if
Okay.
you've got the middle school on one end, and we've basically got high school that also kind of wraps around on the second floor. There's ability that maybe some of these in the wing in between could be the shared spaces that we were just talking about, whether it's art and music or something else. There's also the library that's in the middle of that. So having the middle school on one end, the high school on the other end, kind of gives you that separation in terms of the core stuff, but allows that connection to the
You're not gonna get anything out of this at all.
the shared spaces. Let me get a little bit more detail to that. When we look at, I need to zoom out on
Uh-oh,
this.
here we go.
When we look at the high school layout, now this does not show the addition,
Okay.
just trying to get you kind of oriented as to what's going on here. Oops, I went too far. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm trying to go quick to save Dan's hide, or Matt's hide for
It's too late.
being late.
It's all good.
I gotta deal with her tomorrow, go.
I will.
All right, so
I can go take you out of.
what we're seeing here
Just
is that the green is essentially educational space by and large, and the yellow is what I call the core facilities. That might be different from what Brian was talking about with core classrooms. Core facilities in my mind are the auditorium, gym, cafeteria, library, which is actually in this location.
Music.
Yeah, music and art. Again, I'm not showing the second floor, but there's a second floor that comes down here, and there's a corridor above that connects it all. So if the SAU were gone, and this were the middle school, and this remains the high school, if we can fit that in, it actually keeps those core classrooms separated, but allows a connection across in the middle with the library right in the middle, and then access to the gym, the cafeteria, the auditorium. The concern I had 6 months ago was that the cafeteria is sized such that it would be hard not to combine some middle school and high school. It's very long and narrow, and if you've got anybody coming in at the same time, it's gonna be really difficult to keep them separated. Again, other schools that I've worked on, we've had separate cafeterias, but if you're okay with a single cafeteria, then it probably could work. So moving on, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with the high school. The bottom line is that the high school as a high school is actually pretty well proportioned in terms of the number of classrooms versus the gym, caf, auditorium, that kind of stuff. That
Peter, you gotta mute yourself.
there is extra capacity, but again, it's built into the number of students per room, not the utilization of the rooms themselves.
I can't mute him.
There could easily be an addition out the back, whether it's a small one at the end of the classroom wing, or
Dan,
one
can you
that
mute Peter, please?
goes all the way across to connect. Those are possibilities. The size of it, it depends on, again, what we come up with the total number of classrooms that are gonna be needed. So those are the options.
I'm gonna ask a question that keeps us on the physical building. Are there any requirements about the physical building regarding the children's age or size? Like, do bathrooms have to change from a high school standard to a middle school standard? Are there anything that would need to change about the high school to accommodate younger children?
No, some of those 7th graders are bigger than me. There is child requirements for like 8 and 9-year-olds and below, but not at this level.
That was
Which
one
is
of my big
what I think
questions.
what we originally were talking about was that there may be some of those modifications at the middle school if we're bringing up some of the younger kids.
Right.
But, so,
Which would be the plan in this consolidation, right? Like, we would,
right.
that would have to happen
So-
at the middle school level.
In
It would have to touch all
evaluating
three
the,
schools.
in evaluating the high school, so the thing for me was I want to know what steps we need to take to be able to even evaluate this option, because I truly felt lost, like trying to figure this out on my own. So what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to understand utilization, so that way the administration can tell us, they can tell us what they can do in terms of educational specs.
Yes. Educational specs, I want to define that a little bit better. It's, in the most simplest terms, it's simply a list of rooms, sizes, adjacencies that are required, and that generally comes from the district. The current school manual doesn't note it, but if you go to the 2006 school manual, it's actually, Ed Murdo had put in there that the architect should not be writing the ed specs, because that's the directive to the architect. The architect can help, but shouldn't be writing it. And also, that the ed specs, most districts just keep it at that simple, basic level. But there should be school board policies such as the class size. There should be school board policies such as universal design for learning. If there's gonna be a maker space, if there's gonna be, other special classrooms that don't necessarily exist in other places, if there's something special that this school does, needs to be in that ed spec, so I know to take care of it. There's also the opportunity, another thing that should be in there is any kind of special building concern like sustainability. The original ed specs for the elementary school had net zero design. Obviously, I think I've been told that that's off the table now. So the ed spec should change to reflect that. So, but there might be something in there that you would say, do the best you can with the budget that we've got, or there might be some level that you want to go to, say 25% over code or something like that. Those kind of things ought to be in there, and it goes beyond that. Could be in other things as well. Lastly, the ed specs is an opportunity to engage staff, administration, even parents, public. When we did it for the elementary school, we even included the students in the process. So it's not just a burden, it's an opportunity to really reach out to the public and get good quality feedback from the people that are gonna be voting on the project. So basically, if your ed specs say that Mixing the kids in the core facilities is okay, but then the majority of parents say no, well, you're gonna have a harder time selling the project to the voters. So getting that feedback might be important to get it past this community, this committee.
So, with respect to this option, my feeling and my understanding is in order for us to analyze this option, the first part doesn't really involve this committee because it really involves you guys updating those numbers, the utilization numbers, but then having a conversation about the actual, what the utilization means. Like Jake raised a couple really good points that none of us are really like privy to, which is, you know, if you have you could say, yes, this AP class has 8 kids in it right now, but last year it had 15 in it. You know, we gotta rely on you guys to tell us what we actually could achieve in.
We need the administration to say how much space they need.
Right.
Right.
Well,
if
I
I have to
think-
bring up these 2 grades, I need X number of classrooms to
Well,
make sure I got the flexibility that I need.
But I appreciate that, but I also think we have to be careful, right? Because I like you, but let's be honest, we're gonna say, well, I need all this space, and then you dig into the numbers, no offense to you, but do you pass the space? Class could be 15.
Well, yeah, but they
And I
gotta-
could say, really?
But they gotta start.
May I make a
Like-
proposal?
Yeah.
May I
They
make
have
a
a place to
proposal?
start.
Yeah,
The high school is doing their scheduling for next year.
yeah.
I hope this is obvious. Obviously, we're not moving 7th and 8th grade up next year, correct? Like, we all understand that unless some roof falls or something crazy like that happens.
Will you knock on wood
Yeah.
right now?
But we're not doing any of this next year for the 25-26
Right.
school year. We all just agree on that.
Mhm.
Okay. So Jake's gonna build a schedule and Val are gonna build a schedule for the high school as normal, right? Like that normal procedure. I can ask them for their course numbers and play around with it if we were to take away 8 classroom spaces or 6 classroom spaces or something, and then come back here and explain how how that would look. Like, this is with this model, if we keep all of our classes that are leveled and stuff like that, this is what this would look like. If you condense them down to not. All this stuff is hypothetical because what I cannot do in that scenario is actually build a master schedule, right? Like, so conflicts, you have to factor in conflicts are inevitable, even if we're just looking at raw numbers, right? That you have to kind of plan for. But we can certainly take the real data that they're gonna have from course signups right now and apply it to what it would look like to kind of try and do this like on paper next year in the high school, and talk about this is what you're sacrificing or not sacrificing if you were to do this.
And also help figure out, okay, if we can't fit that there, then we know this proposal also includes an addition on the high school, right? Like that's one of the things that's gonna help us determine. So as we're trying to evaluate this option, we need to understand
correct,
all of
because
those pieces.
we could come back, like, I don't know what it's gonna take, I don't know where it's gonna take, I would have to actually legitimately dig into the numbers, so some of these things are hypothetical is what I'm gonna say right now. The numbers may say, like, hey, like if you really wanted to instead utilize all the current classrooms in the high school, you take 6 off the table and jam all these stuff in, you cannot run the number of science classes you have hypothetically, right? Because you would then only have 2 science rooms on the table, or you would have to convert a different room to a science room and take these ones off the table. Is that something the community would support, right?
Does any of that conversation include like the industrial arts converted into classrooms?
I think
And
you gotta
the
start
SAU.
with not assuming any conversion of any spaces at this point, right? If you were to take
Okay.
what is that industrial arts room right now, right? Which is a giant space,
Yeah.
but you're gonna have to do an incredible amount of work to turn that into more you are, like, I know you're shaking your head, you're gonna take everything out, you're gonna slice that up, you're probably slicing the room next to it up. Like, if you're gonna really make it a legitimate classroom you can teach out of, you gotta do work to it.
You do, but it's
And we
not,
should
it's
keep
not,
that classroom.
you know,
Go ahead.
millions of dollars.
Just to Carrie's point,
First doesn't
I
have-
think we have to trust our educational experts and not believe that they're going to ask for more than they.
But I think they're
No, but if the courses are based on not a established course catalog that every year we run this and now the off years we run this, we just said we do.
But-
And instead, like maybe we don't need a bunch of 10-person art classes we can combine.
But I think
into one.
I think what we're getting to though is that they're going to be able to present that to
Right,
us, and they
absolutely.
may say, you know, we offer this right now.
Right.
Yes, there are only 15 people, but we have to figure out from the community, is this something that they
So I-
support cutting?
Exactly, and I'm willing to wait for the numbers because I'm interested to see. I've seen what's offered for arts. Do we need all of them? Do we need all of this stuff?
Well, I
So the
think-
question is, we have a smaller size. Do we? I am of the opinion we offer too much.
Where are you gonna put those 15 kids who are no longer in the yard?
Well, if I have a bunch of 15-person classrooms,
I
I
think we
move
can-
5 into
so-
3 other
You can't
classes.
keep
Hold on,
Even
jump
those
in,
study
jump in,
halls.
hold on.
There's 3 other art classes.
We can project all that stuff.
And
But
I'm
like, we
waiting
do
for your
have to
information.
be, like, if you're gonna take this class off the table and it
Yeah.
had 8 kids in it, you can redisperse them on paper, right, to other locations and like figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
So you can factor that stuff in. But you have to be ready to have a conversation. Let's use art as an example, because someone just mentioned art, right? We have 2 art teachers at Campbell High School right now. For a school of that size, that's a lot of art teachers. But those classes are to the max, right? Like, kids are really into those classes, right? So like, yeah, you can condense down to just 1 art room and then limit yourself to 8 art periods, but then you're gonna have all these kids who are interested in this programming not be able to take those classes. Is that something you're willing to sacrifice? And we can engage in those conversations and
And we're
talk
gonna
about the same.
and realistically,
We're running your art program.
but do
Well,
we-
again, this is where,
We're-
like, we got.
but right now-
yes.
Pulling it back to
Let's-
the building, can I ask a question about the building?
Yes.
In that SAU space that's there now, do you have an estimate of how many classrooms that could be?
Well, if there's 6 above, it'd probably be 6 below.
Well,
Oh,
No,
no.
because
Well,
the
no.
principal's on one side, I think. It was originally
Yeah.
gonna be like.
We have the front office, we have the
3.
nurse's
I
office.
think
The
it's
original high school was designed to not have the SAU there.
Right.
Right, so I'm just asking how many, like, I think that's good for them to know, right, like, without doing an addition, right, you have that space, you could turn it into classrooms, how many
I
can
think the
it be?
superintendent indicated that definitely 1, and if you were willing to knock down a
I
concrete
think
wall,
I
maybe
think
2.
in that hallway where the SAU is, you can legitimately gain 2 regular ed classrooms.
Okay.
The room that's 128 and some reconfiguration of SAU, like where I currently am and where some of the office space is. And maybe with some creativity, utilize a little bit of that space for student service, for special ed.
So that's what I was getting at, like, so
Maybe.
when you do your analysis, you
I
should
will
factor in
that
Right.
2 of
being able to
those-
have 2 classrooms there.
100%.
And so if we needed 8, right, we gotta take 6 upstairs, we can build 2 downstairs, there's your 8.
So essentially what you would do is take their current project, like, numbers for next year and see if you can jam it into the further hallway.
Right.
Can I just summarize what I heard you say, just to try to move it along? I think what you're saying is, your recommendation at the moment is to run your curriculum scheduling for next year, to give us an idea how this would play out.
It's a natural starting place, yes.
And at this point, we're just throwing dots at the wall to do anything different.
Yeah.
You need to make that activity first.
Right, I just want to clarify where I see this going, and if anyone
But I
else
just want to
disagrees.
say what I heard him say.
Yeah, 100%. And so, again, I want to reiterate the fact that the reason I don't think that people perceive that we are having this level of detailed conversations, and I think that we need to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, or where this is going, is here's the realities of how what we would have to do to make this work.
Yeah.
And then we can analyze, okay, what do we think the costs are associated with that, and what do we think the impacts are, and would those be supported?
But
Right? That's what
that's-
we're trying to get towards.
So I think that's his activity for the
Right.
foreseeable future.
Can I
Right.
interject?
Yes.
We're ignoring one option that's still on the table.
What's
That's
that?
What do you
a
mean?
reasonable option, they renovate and add
We're not
additional
We're not
ignoring
ignoring
it.
it, this
We're
is,
not
I
ignoring
think
it.
it's still on the table.
it's definitely
Yeah.
still on the table, we're,
So let
right
me-
now we're focusing on
So,
this
so
discussion.
let me
Today,
um,
we're having the
let's-
discussion.
yeah. So let me just also
Because I think
clarify
we
one.
agree that's
Let me
one.
clarify one point as well.
Right.
I know that we are we are under the deadline of we are supposed to present to the school board an option. The school board did raise the point last night. Andrew raised the point. I don't think you're going to have an option for us by March 18th, right? And so we can, and we can take a vote on it. But the one thing
There's
I want
not
to
enough
be
information for us.
well, but the one thing I want to just be careful of is if we as a committee vote on something without providing enough context on this other option.
I can guarantee there will be community who push back.
Carrie, finish the sentence.
Can we at least vote on the other option to consider it and have the school board also look further into this and allow us to participate?
I think that's what Dan wrote up in.
That's what I wrote up.
So,
That's what he wrote up.
Yeah,
so the
that's what I-
only,
That's a different question.
so
that's
the,
what I wrote up, is basically,
That-
and we can get into that in
we
the
can
next
talk-
agenda topic, but
We
like,
can talk about that later.
that's,
so the only thing I wanna,
It's
the only
tough, it's tough.
balance that
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out is, if we are gonna go towards, if we're gonna do an RFP, are we gonna start spending money on something? And if we spend money on it, then if by chance we go through this exercise and it's like, wow, this is like actually a very reasonable path, then we've spent money on that. So I'm trying to get us through
but I think,
a fair amount of this initial work, so we can have more substantive conversations, so that we aren't faced with pushback as a committee.
I totally get that.
didn't-
Yeah.
But I don't think you're
Go
gonna, and I don't think you need to spend almost anything to put out an RFP, right? We need to write it, we need to put it out there, like, it shouldn't cost us much of anything. Even if it did, like, I think you have to spend that money to know
But we
what that
don't-
option's final price tag is, and then we have to put a process and a plan and a price tag on this option, and that's how you get to a final decision, right? Like,
Well,
we've got it down to the final two, we
we
need to
need-
know the nitty gritty details of each one now.
Can I suggest something? I think, going to what Denise said, and back to what Brian said, there needs to be a parallel activity going forward. Does anybody disagree with that?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Well, I guess
Well,
I'm
I mean, the reason I bring it up is we
curious.
voted against this last meeting.
Voted against what?
That's another question.
No, we voted against looking at both an addition and a redistribution.
Did?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand is what that parallel process would look like. That's all I'm trying to understand, is what we're,
And if that's, but I just want to go back, we voted not to look at both of them.
You
If
brought
we
it
want
up,
to
you
revisit that
seconded,
vote, we
voted on
can.
understood, right.
Okay, but that's where we are now.
Right.
Pick one or
And-
the
and-
other.
And my question is,
I
if
think we can, I mean, I look at that a little bit differently, right? I think that is, we took a vote to not look at that and present that as our recommendation at that last meeting, right? Like, I don't think we were ready to make that recommendation where we were last meeting. So
that's
that's
the
why
question.
I voted
I'm-
against
I'm
it.
gonna agree with
Doesn't mean
Brian.
I'm not
We
agreeing
voted
that
against this.
We did.
We
Yeah,
did.
and
But
again, you're
go
gonna-
back and read the
you don't-
motion, like, it was to present it to the school board as our final recommendation after that meeting, right?
To do both of them in parallel.
So you wanna pick one?
You know, I think
I don't want to pick one. I want to make sure the other one is.
oh, you're only.
It's
choice.
already, we have a lot of information on that, we don't have a lot of information.
I think
Well, I think
everyone's
we have to
right in
pursue
terms
it.
of that vote. You're all right. Last week, we voted not to send two forward to the board, and we're right because we wanted to have another meeting to talk more about these two options, right? I think
Right.
everyone's right, and you could, as a
So-
committee, have a new vote with the same exact kind of proposal you talked about last.
Kyle just also mentioned, because I was gonna tell him that he doesn't have to stay for our debating with each other, that he does have some information about so we've talked a lot about what we have to do planning wise to figure this out for the high school, but there's the middle school's the other piece of this, right? Because there's stuff
Grammar
that,
school.
the
Yeah,
other,
I'd
so.
like to know the trickle down.
The middle school problem is actually a bigger problem.
In what way?
I'll get to that if I can
Well,
get
go
to
ahead,
my
get-
Go,
presentation.
keep
Get to
going. Please
Just to
keep going.
clarify and correct myself that, to Brian's point, this is the layout of the high school without the SAU. So how it was designed, you've got some offices down here, you've got a couple of special ed areas here, you've got the nurse, you've got the principal's office, secretary. So, yeah, you wouldn't be able to populate this all with classrooms, because then you'd have to move the principal and the nurse and everything else.
But just the left-hand lane would be the targeted
Yeah,
classroom.
so where's the SAU now?
It's on the left there.
It's on the
All that
left,
left-handed
it's all in
space.
there.
Yeah, so basically, two classrooms, keep where the space.
That's what I wanted to know.
Better off leaving
Appreciate
the
that.
SAU there and building
Alright.
on.
I hate to leave at the heated moment of this, but my daughter really, I need to take her to dinner.
You should,
Now, it's late for dinner.
Please don't burn the place down while I'm gone.
Well, this is in the fire department.
They've been
Yeah.
on
I guess that's a good
masses.
point.
Yeah, I got a spare couch.
Yeah, we're in-
On.
we're in the fire department.
So,
Again, I gotta deal with Kenzie tomorrow, so.
now we'll get to the difficult stuff. I did the same level of analysis for the middle school, moving the elementary school all up to that. So basically, a K or pre-K through 6 at the middle school. So again, the way that I do things, try to figure out the number of students per grade, what the class size is, it comes up with the number of classes that we need.
Can I pause it, Kyle?
Wait.
Yeah, we're not considering
Pause.
that. We're considering moving.
I was gonna say.
Two
were you
grades.
We're considering moving
jumping
3
to
and
the
4,
2
3 and 4
million
through 6.
already?
Uh-oh, sorry.
Considering
Did
where
Matt
we're
not
gonna
tell
be
you?
budget-wise,
Well,
it may
we
not be a
should-
bad
we
choice.
should look at this.
Because we're gonna get screwed in the
What-
coming
what
years
are you
with
talking about
budgets.
He's talking about moving the entire elementary school to LMS.
No, but we already know
Oh,
we're losing several
no.
hundred thousand every couple of
Okay,
years.
all right, well, good, this is not gonna be as difficult as I thought. Basically, when you look at the middle school area, and I've presented this before, there's not a viable spot to put an addition. So putting more grades in than what's currently there
That's
is a
not-
bad idea.
No additions are
Okay,
It was 2 grades out, 2 grades in.
Kyle, we're talking about putting 3 through 6 or 4 through 6 in the middle school.
all right, so I did
3
that
through
same
6 or 4
analysis
through 8 or 7.
for 3 through 6 and pre-K through 2 staying at Griffin. That's what
Yep.
you folks are expecting.
Yes.
Okay,
It
good.
was option 7, I believe.
Yes, yes. And so I've got the background data
I'm the
to
historian.
show that.
I'm
And-
sorry, at the risk of being obnoxious, Brian, in your research of all of the different school configurations, did you find 3 through 6?
This is a good story.
Pop up, Brian?
Anything, Brian? Did you find
It's a
one?
good story. No. There's currently one 3 through 6 school at in the entire state, and it's the school my dad taught at for years and years, and I never put 2 and 2 together, even though I've literally been in his classroom and watched him teach and put stuff on his bulletin boards, and never clicked in my head that the one 3 through 6 school in the state is the one that he worked at forever. But
Is he still alive?
yeah, he just retired last year. So I should be.
What a perfect resource.
And he was. I actually asked him a lot about it because I saw him over vacation. But
That's funny.
But that 3 through 6 school is Cutler, and Cutler is going. It's no longer going to be a 3 through 6 school. It's going to be a K through 6 school because they're doing all. Kyle, I think, actually designed the building.
It's under construction now.
It's under construction right now, and it will be transitioned to a K through 6. So there's no other 3 through 6 schools in the state, but there are 3 4 through 6 schools. There's one in Hopkinton, there's one in Brookline, and one in Governor Wentworth. So that are 4 through 6. Hopkinton would be a good, and I'm going to go up there to see all of their schools in a couple weeks. I know the superintendent up there well. He's about to be the new dairy superintendent, and they have the model. I think we are at least attempting to mimic where they have a pre-K through 3 school, a 4 through 6 school, and then a 7 through 8 school, because the high school up there is also middle high school is also 7 through 8. So, and they have roughly 300 kids in their high school. So it's a little bit smaller than here, but size-wise is.
This is Hopkinton?
This is Hopkinton, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now,
And they're
that
all
was
within a
helpful.
stone's throw of each other too, aren't they?
I don't know.
Just to clarify, we're not, what you just described is 3 classes or grades at LMS. right?
Yeah.
Aren't we talking about 4?
I mean, we talked about 3 and 4, but the question was, what are other schools in the state? There's no other 3 through 6 schools in the
Okay,
state.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
The assumption's always been, and you've made the statement, and I've heard it,
Yeah.
2 out, 2 in.
LMS is the perfect 4-grade school.
It is built for 4 grades.
Okay,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
And that proves out in the analysis that I did, that basically looking at the number of classrooms that are required, and it's also special ed, core facilities, that kind of stuff. You look at the bottom line, and it's almost exactly the same. Having the 7th and 8th grade out actually creates maybe a little bit more space, but otherwise, you could just simply shuffle the kids around and.
Does that include the 2 that were done in the recent LMS improvement?
No, it doesn't.
To what?
I don't
So
think
there's
so.
actually 2 more rooms in
They added 2
here.
more classrooms.
Oh, like the special ed room and stuff?
They did
Yes.
the locker room.
Yes,
They're not full classroom settings.
but their facilities, the way you're using them for, what, special ed, wasn't it?
Yes, one's a special ed office and one is a special ed and self-contained.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's
Useful
2 additional
space.
spaces that weren't in his configuration.
Right. So then I did the same analysis on
Paid $10 million for it.
the students per classroom, the number of students per grade for a K2 at
Actually,
Griffin.
Kyle, can I back you up for the middle school as it currently is, just based on adding a population of 8 and 9-year-olds? Would there have to be any retrofitting for any, whether it be
My question from
plumbing,
before, but on the
toilets,
middle school side.
like,
Yeah,
What are the building
is it plug and
implications to
play
do
or
that?
would there have to be adjustments?
So probably
I know
no
toilet height is
adjustments
a thing that
required,
has to-
because it's kind of like at that cusp. I think the smaller grades, you'd want to be looking at toilet heights. We just went through this at,
Sink heights, toilet height, it all comes down to
Mount
bathrooms.
Caesar, where Cutler's moving to. We ended up lowering the toilets in the kindergarten wing, but nowhere else.
But 3 or 4 would be fine.
Yeah, I think
And most
fourth,
schools.
fourth, fifth grade, I think would be fine. We'd also might want to, well, there's no stairs at middle school, there's no stairs. right?
No, there's no stairs, yeah.
Because like at Mount Caesar, we're doing dual handrails, so that way the smaller kids have
Yeah.
something to grab. But other than that, there's not many changes. I mean, you think about it, the kids, when they leave the school, they go home, it's all adult height stuff as well. So they're usually used to that kind of thing. Hand washing sinks for the preschool and kindergarten, you want those a little bit lower. 31 inches, and toilets instead of 17 inches or 15, but not huge changes, not huge changes.
Is there any difference in like special spaces if it's third and fourth graders versus fifth and
I
sixth
mean,
graders?
this is when you talk about the model of the school, right? Like, it's no longer gonna be a middle school, it's gonna be an elementary school.
Right.
Like, so, they're gonna be
Playground.
more contained in their classes, right? So you gotta redo class spaces. But when I say redo, I mean, you gotta look at some of the furniture, like what are the unified arts you're gonna offer? You have to make decisions along that, right? They have, what do you call the tech? You might call it tech, the
Tech ed?
tech ed, yeah. Probably not offering that as unified art at the elementary level, right? So like, what do you do with that space? So you have to make
Okay.
decisions on.
could turn
Can I
it
make
into
a suggestion,
Can
Brian?
they turn it into a makerspace? Yeah.
Brian, in the interest, it's 7 o'clock now, so we shouldn't even be talking about LMS. Because you've got other things on GMS you want to talk about or not?
I just a little bit more. I was prepared to talk about LMS as a K through 6, and if that's off the table.
That's
it
off the
really-
table.
It really simplifies my presentation here. I guess the last piece that I had to talk about was GMS.
So wait, we started with saying that LMS was the bigger problem, so are we saying it's no longer a bigger problem?
No,
If
it's
you're
no
not
longer.
It's
having
gonna be
kids.
K through 6, it's gonna be a bigger issue.
There's no issue, there's no issue
Problem
moving to
solved.
LMS. Go ahead, go
The
ahead.
issue you wanted
Problem
caused a
solved.
big problem.
Well, I still think long-term we should be consolidating into 2, but, you know, whatever.
Right, but that's the big
Well,
problem.
that's what I wanted to talk about, was that when you look at the building, when you look at the site in particular, there's not a good spot to put in additions.
No, and I hear you, and I think we should have consolidated at GMS, but we just spent 10 million on LMS, so that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, is that, some of that would end up being upended if you start, doing major additions, and
Yep.
and not a good use of the money. As far as GMS then, if you're reducing it by that number of students, it obviously alleviates a lot of stress on the building. I think there's still some areas of problem that you'd wanna consider. I had presented before that the 40s and 50s wing here, the quality of the building, I think it's better to demolish it and to use the open space for drainage, getting it further away from the highway. There's a lot of things that would
So
be useful.
where is is part of that the 1930s?
The little
That's
little
the
square
I
tag on the
I know that I had people coming at me with any thoughts of, you can't take down that spot.
It's preserved.
All right, good.
It's preserved. And
May not be used, but it's preserved.
I say you could go there. Okay.
we're disconnecting it from the main part of the building
Right.
now. By demolishing this, we
Makes it
can use
perfectly
this again
insane.
for some surface drainage, we can use it for some play areas, there's a lot of things we could,
But
that would be
Kyle, just a
useful.
point, there's 13 classrooms in there, right?
So we've got, one.
No,
two-
in the 1960s
Oh, yeah.
and 50s, the
Yes,
13
like that.
classrooms has got to be replaced.
Right.
Before
so-
we even talk about additions.
Yes.
That's a
So there
lot
are-
of classrooms.
So there are
Where the two
a couple
grades.
of things that would need to get fixed. We've got some issues with the front entrance
Right.
area with security and whatnot. And yeah, if we demolish this, you'd have to replace it with an addition.
And then you got
above.
6 portables you need to take care of too.
Yes.
Well,
So you're in,
But
If we're
it's
reducing
always
by 2 grades.
eliminated
But
8
it's
classrooms
way
at least.
smaller.
I was gonna say,
for
it's always been my
kids.
thought of,
Stop
with
and
this
think about it.
reconsolidation option, like, you're moving 2 grades out of this school, renovate the space you have there, clean it up, make it better, don't demolish anything, don't need an addition, you should be able to bring all of the portables into the building.
On the other hand, if you knock that down, all of a sudden we've centralized our central services. 'cause we
I-
don't
Yeah,
have
but
the
you now
wing.
you don't have the space that you need.
Again,
Yeah,
I
but
think
to
you're
fix
both.
the driveway issues in
I
this
think everyone's
plan.
right here,
Which-
right? Like, this is where you start going out to design firms and you figure out what problems you're trying to solve here. Using this right here without knowing any of the details, right? Everyone's right, you gotta replace those 13 classrooms essentially, because what you're kind of it's not as simple as this, please no one box me into this, but like, moving the 2 grades up, it's not exactly this, but you're getting rid of the portables in some shape or form,
And you're
right?
pulling the core services to the center
Yeah,
of the
you're
building.
pulling everyone inside
Can
the
we
building.
agree to like
Well, with it-
locate
with-
the portables?
So just
We
roll
own
with me
those.
for a second, roll with me for a second. Where the demolish is right here, and Dan, this is where you can jump in. I
Yeah.
think it's clearly the worst part of the building, excluding the 30s that we're not using. But
Yes.
as the space we're utilizing, this area might need so much renovation, it actually is cheaper to do addition.
No, I disagree with you fully, because we have 2 reports
But
that
we
say otherwise.
don't know.
Question.
That's
But
what
you
we-
cannot make that statement until
My
we
statement is I
know.
don't know, I
Right.
can
And
make that
that's, so
statement.
don't say it.
So one thing we could look at
Please.
is maybe not demolishing the whole thing, but keeping the top 8 classes, then you wouldn't be down as
Again, I
much.
think we're trying to solution the problem we don't even know
Correct,
exists.
yeah, that's
Like-
what I'm
like,
saying.
Don't even go down this road, right? We don't need to talk about whether we're gonna demolish it or we're gonna do an addition.
Well, I just think
We're
the kids
focusing on
can-
moving the grades. If we
Right.
move the grades out, in the current building that sits on the ground today,
Yep.
could we bring everybody into the building and be fine with the space? Not whether the building's in
Well,
the right
space-wise,
condition.
you should be
Does
able
the
to.
space work? Is there enough classrooms to fit all the students?
Well,
Well, it's
just by basic numbers?
Yeah.
No, because as I said, right now, we're currently at minimum 9 classrooms short of fully operational.
When
If you
you-
move
when you
time-
say
2 grades out,
give
though.
me 1 second,
But,
Ron.
just clarify, when you say 9, please? Does that mean to eliminate the?
Yeah, if we get rid of the portables.
That's all I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah.
Sorry,
So
sorry,
yeah,
but-
6 classrooms in the portable, plus we're already
Thank you.
running 3
That's all.
short because of just during operational.
Yep.
We're currently 9 of the building. We're 9 short. If we move 2 grades out, we've gained 8, so we're still a net -1.
Okay.
One other thing to point out.
That's what
is
I'm
that
asking, right? So you're one,
That's all I
potentially
wanted.
one short.
Didn't we do?
The portables are kindergartens, and there's not the same size spaces inside the building, correct? I mean, usually a kindergarten is about 1,000
Yeah, no
square feet.
analysis, just a number
Yeah.
delta.
And the,
Typically, what we would do is design a kindergarten with toilet facilities and a sink in it, which you don't generally have in that 40s and 50s.
No.
so if you, remember, redistribute, we've got to find someplace with SAU.
Well, apparently we can put them in the portables, so if we're entering the portables into the building, SAU goes in the portables. Dude,
If
we
we're, if
own
we're
those
willing to keep
portables.
the portables, right? Okay.
We bought them.
We own them.
We
I
own them,
understand.
it seems
Relocate them over
crazy
to-
to just
to
toss
CHS.
them away.
I'm not just saying this, the SAU is secondary to all of this. You can
Right.
figure out where to jam in the SAU whenever the time comes for that.
You guys
But
don't
it's
go
always
remote.
good to plan, I mean,
You don't
instead of
go
throwing
remote.
them away, we can relocate them.
We own them outright. We own them. So, we shouldn't just junk them.
All right, so
You can
just,
rent buildings
but just
for
go back to the discussion here. If we eliminate the 50s and 60s building, and we've taken away, we need 9 more, right?
He said it'd be one,
No, I'm sorry. We're taking what?
Currently, the building, so currently, the building, minus the portables, is at minimum 9 rooms short of operation.
Okay, so if we take 2 grades out of there, wait a minute,
We
that's
gain 8.
8. So in
Delta negative.
theory, you could move in, but you would need the 50s and 60s building.
correct,
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, you can use the 30s building, because that's part of the.
renovation, right? Like,
And
so
that's the wild card?
I think we're trying to find a solution
agreed.
to something that we're gonna send out for an RFP.
Correct.
Agreed.
So
Yeah, let's let
think
somebody else do
I'm
this
with
part.
Brian on this. I think everybody's right. And this is what shakes out in the RFP. We give a paper and we say, we need this, here's what we got, what are we gonna do?
So what I said way at the beginning was, be clear on what those asks are. Because so far, over the past few years, working here, it hasn't been clear to me, and I've made assumptions that I probably shouldn't have. So anybody that you work with, you gotta be very careful that you're clear about that. So the numbers of classrooms, the numbers of students in the classrooms, the adjacencies. I could see where, you know, your RFP goes out and you get a whole range of possibilities and it's not clear. you want to narrow it down so that you can more fairly compare these proposals.
Hey Kyle, while we have you here, we've talked about the assumption of redistribution. Well, let's say that we don't have redistribution. You provided us some direction back in July.
Yep.
That included how to take care of that with an addition in the stuff you provided to us in July. Is
Okay.
that still in the ballpark of what you think it would be?
The costs?
Well, I mean, how you would tackle it. Like, for instance, the addition, the renovation with addition has like 34,000 square feet, but that assumes the 50 to 60 building going.
It never assumed it going, it's just not being part of the renovations.
Well, okay, but it's, well, no.
I wouldn't want
No,
Carrie
you
to get
you
really
did,
upset with
you
me.
did assume it would demolish because you showed the roadway going up through there.
Well, I'm more
can go up.
interested, how many classrooms do you?
You can't go up without demolishing it because the property
Not the
line.
30s building, but yeah, through here.
Right here.
Yeah, so I'm saying the 50s and 60s gets
50s and
demolished,
60s, yeah.
not the 30s.
The 30s I can stay, yeah.
So that estimate is, I just want to be sure that it's still in the ballpark. So that estimate is selective, no,
But I think, and
but that's,
maybe.
just let me finish, let me
Yep.
finish. That was $29,800,000. And that
So-
include an addition of 34,000 feet.
Right, so
Is that
again,
still kind of in
based
the
on,
ballpark?
based on certain assumptions. If you change those assumptions, the number's gonna change.
So
Okay, but I mean, just, the reason I ask is, we were in this big debate about, you know, what's the range of cost that such things would require. And so I just want to be sure you're still kind of comfortable that that's what the range of those numbers are.
I took a look at it before coming over here.
Yep.
And, yeah, I think it's doable. I think you're gonna get, you know, each architect's gonna have a different take on it.
And it depends on what we
It
ask.
depends on what we
Like,
ask
that
for you.
is-
That's
is
a
a
huge
huge
thing, right? Like,
component.
I'd like to
You built that
understand
based
what
off what
the
was asked for in the
Yes,
past. Like,
that's how we
we are
started
gonna
this whole
drastically
evening.
change what we're asking
Yes,
for.
it's gonna be a much different ask. Just take the net zero of it all. Like, I
Right.
think we're all in agreement that's not gonna be part of any proposal for anything that we do,
Perfect.
period,
So,
right?
but back to your sketch, how many understand what the greens represent? Like, there's an addition, like, what does it look like? Like, are you talking like a total of 5 classrooms? What do they look
I
like?
didn't even.
You just, that's the space that you've designated for
area.
It's an
a-
area you could put
So
some
once we
stuff in.
finish redoing the ed specs and we know how many
Okay.
classrooms we're doing, we'll look at what's existing, what we need, and come up with a delta that's what
Okay.
the addition is. And then somebody would design the addition.
Okay.
But, so I think for right now, the answer to your question is it feasible? Yes.
No, I know.
Well, and Kyle, just going back to the stuff you gave us in July,
Sure.
your option 1 for repairs only,
Yep.
that included some minor amount of new construction, right? 11,000 square feet?
I believe so, yeah.
And so that's still, repairs only with some minors is still $26 million. Is that, you still think that's the right number?
Something in that.
Guys,
in that order of
I
magnitude.
wanna just chime in here, we are sticking
man.
to well, we were
That's
sticking to
dinner.
the one option that we were supposed to be discussing tonight. And we have 15 minutes left, and we need to, be able to wrap up the conversation. So,
Are you at a restaurant?
Chili's.
I'm in the car, I couldn't get away from this.
You're a dedicated
All right,
soul.
for
Happy
Matt's
birthday,
sanity-
Kenzie.
And it's
Yeah,
just
let's
7:15,
close this
and for
discussion.
Matt's sanity.
Go take care of your daughter.
Yeah. Kyle, do you have any final thoughts? Because we do need to approve minutes and then talk about next steps. and stuff.
One thing I wanted to just talk about quickly is the current status of state building aid, because I figured that at some point, that's gonna become part of the discussion. I met with Tim Carney, he's the new administrator for state building aid. There's been a lot of changes over the past year or so. I think I told you folks that I'd actually been volunteering with Amy Clark, his predecessor, in rewriting the rules. There's a lot of stuff in the new rules that I had a part in helping to add. One of those in particular is it is required to have educational specifications as part of your submission for state building aid. That was something that I had a hand in putting in there. The feasibility study is also as well, and then of course you need the schematic designs. One thing that Tim said to me that I thought was important for you folks to hear was that the current budget does not include money for new projects. So that would be a 2-year moratorium if that were put in place. Considering that you're not ready to move forward with it, maybe that doesn't affect you too much. But you do have to, be cognizant of, what the rank list looks like. And if there's a 2-year gap between now and then, and there's more people or more districts submitting on it, it could put you further down the rank list. Unless you have a conversation with Tim and say, hey, we've got a new plan. It meets all the goals of our original plan. Can we stay on the rank list? I think that's worth having that conversation with them. The reason being is that when I had that conversation with Amy Clark and she said no, it's now a different administrator, he might say yes. So I think it's worth asking the question. It's also worth maybe talking to whomever might have an ear on the budget process at the state to see if there's actually gonna be money put into it.
That's right.
Both of us. But I'm on the educational funding committee of the state right now, and I can tell you, everything's changing.
Yeah.
Next week, we have bills coming to the floor that's gonna change the funding formula, it's gonna change how we do special ed, it's gonna change SWEP. There's a lot of moving pieces up there right now, including many at the DOE, as you know.
Can you imagine how it affects me, who lives on?
I can't imagine how it affects even us right now, because there's so many pieces.
Right, that's why I'm considering our options, basically.
Assuming no state aid.
Assuming no state aid, and we'll file for whatever's available when we get to a point where we're actually gonna do something.
So.
And if it's $1 million, if it's $100, like, whatever it is.
And there is a bill to lock funding in and keep it in place. I'm not sure what the number is, it didn't come before us, but it's in policy and administration. So that once funding is awarded, there is a bill, if it gets passed, it'll be like, here, you're at place 12, you stay there. The funds won't lapse, they'll stay.
But I mean, if you've been awarded funds for procurement.
If it's forward and backwards in a lot of these things up there. But that's the idea, is that so people can have some stability to their project plans, that once you're approved, it's gonna lock it in, and if you don't get that project done in 3 years, like you said, and it's 5 years, your funds are still gonna be there.
Yeah,
Which is right now, they are lapsing. So if you don't make your deadlines, you lose the funding. So that's gonna help solidify folks' plans.
Alright, we got about 10 minutes left.
Overall.
Kyle,
I'm
anything
gonna take
else?
off to give you some.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, we appreciate it.
If you need any help with connecting with Tim Carney, he actually asked me and asked me questions, so I think I've got a good relationship with him.
Yeah,
That's
appreciate it.
a question that we need to ask, just let me know and I can try to set something.
That'd
Thank
be
you
great.
for coming
Alright,
out.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
See you folks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Alright, I don't know who's on the phone here, Matt and Dan, I don't know if either are speaking, but cut me off any chance you want, guys. I think the best thing right now is to try and get back onto our agenda. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to keep us on time. I think we should try to approve and vote on previous meetings. So I think there was a new system in place. Ron completed the minutes. He sent that out to the group. And
Had a
there
revised and a new one.
So whichever ones we were, I think the understanding was that if you had suggested revisions, that you would have sent that to Dan in advance so we could take care of that quicker. So did anyone have any revisions that they sent Dan?
No, we didn't see any.
To the minutes?
Yep.
Okay, what were they?
For the 225 meeting, I had a bunch of them that I had sent to Dan yesterday.
Can you give us, okay, Dan, you there?
I can tell you where they are if you want to just go through them.
Did you?
I apologize that it fell down on the job of doing that, being on work travel. 14-hour days get to me.
Okay, let's see if we can cruise through these quickly.
Let's start with it, let's start with the revised 21325.
I think that's great. So 213 minutes, so people have the ability to read the revised ones.
They were sent.
Yeah.
They were sent.
They were sent, so you had the opportunity, whether you did or not, I guess is irrelevant. So can we vote on those revised minutes? I need someone to do,
I move that we approve the revised
Yeah.
213, 225 meeting minutes.
good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Discussion.
What's that?
Hearing none, even though I can't really do this, can we call a vote?
All those in favor say
We're not
aye.
allowed to do this? All
Nobody's
those-
gonna argue with you.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Put your hand up because we gotta do a count. So we know that
One on
looks
the
like.
phone.
One on the phone.
3 in the room, am I reading correctly here? All right.
4.
4.
4 in the room, all opposed, raise your hands.
I'll abstain.
Any who's
Abstaining.
abstaining?
I wasn't
We
here
got
for that meeting.
4 and 4 abstaining.
Okay, 404.
Great. All right, I need well, we should do these through discussion. So can we make I gotta practice because I actually have to run the next board meeting to start it
I
up.
make a motion
Peter,
to
can you
approve the meeting minutes of February 25th, 2025 as submitted.
Do I have a second? Someone who can
A
vote
second
on
for
this.
discussion.
Yes, that's all we're looking for.
I know.
Second the motion, discussion.
I have edits.
Great, let's jump in.
Page 2, in the first paragraph, I think should be edited to say that we had a discussion about having no assumptions of what a renovation of GMS would do to any portions of the
Which
schools.
paragraph are you talking about?
First paragraph, page 2.
Well, I'm not sure what that is.
No, I don't have it up on,
What is it? All right, so,
Page 2, first paragraph, it was noted that the current assumptions for the renovation, ...
okay, is keeping with the 50th, is that the paragraph?
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And so what do you?
I think it needs to be edited to say we had no assumptions. We are not making an assumption whether or not the 50s or 60s building needs to be demolished or an addition needs, like, we have no assumptions of what a renovation would entail.
Well, that's not what we.
I believe that's exactly what we discussed.
No,
That's what I
that's
heard.
not true. When we put together the options, that was included, and we talked that through.
It's not an assumption we're making. We talked about doing we consolidated the renovation and renovation addition option and said we're gonna go out to RFP and have no assumptions about what that entails. Whether it includes an addition or not, we don't know. We are gonna put our list of needs together and say, this is what we need. You guys,
Just
firms
wait,
tell us.
Wait. This is talking about what the renovation option was. Now, what happens is later on, we actually combine the renovation and the renovation only. So this paragraph is talking about what was there before. Down below, the motion was made to combine those into a renovation with the possibility of additions. So this paragraph precedes this motion. That's what was, this is the definition of what those options were prior to this motion.
That's not how I read that, then. Like, it reads to me like you're saying that we assumed a renovation will have to include an addition.
That's when we had them all up in the options? No.
I don't remember having that
No,
conversation.
No, the renovation did not include an addition. In the 5 options, the renovation option only renovated what's there, had no addition.
Correct?
Then we had a renovation with an addition.
Uh-huh.
And that included putting on an addition and doing away with the 50s and 60s building. That was the assumptions in the renovation with an option, renovations with an addition.
No, those,
My
So we had others,
understanding,
present.
At all for that.
yeah,
I just made the assumption that a renovation with addition means at some point we will need an addition. I didn't know what that was gonna look like.
right.
my-
You're making the assumption based off of the previous reports that exist, that I had no assumption of that. Dan says he had no assumption. Go ahead, Denise.
My understanding is a disagreement is actually that the chairman is the one who's in charge of deciding what the truth and what is going to be noted.
Oh,
in the
come
minutes. According to Robert's rules.
So let's
With the
just have
I
table,
think-
table them,
Can
have an
someone make
off.
this motion?
Uh-huh.
Okay, someone, we need to do a
I
motion
can't
to
make,
table it, correct?
I
know
can't
you
make a
can't. I
motion,
can't.
but somebody make a motion to table it, discuss offline, come back.
I make a motion to table it and I can forward out the notes that Joe had and I will talk with Matt as to how is this gonna work in the future.
Do we have a second on that?
Second tabling the minutes.
Can we vote on that? All in favor, raise your hand.
One on the phone.
1, 2, 3,
I can't vote.
4, 5, 6,
I can
7,
just
8, 9,
recommend a
9,
motion
0.
so we
I
can
think that's
vote.
everybody. Any nays?
Peter's able to vote too, because Matt, Matt or Peter can vote.
Yep.
Peter? Aye, 10. Any noes? Any abstentions? Getting there. I got a couple weeks, so I gotta practice.
You're doing great.
I'm just excited to bang again. Let's be honest.
You have to get one first.
We have one. I'm
There's
ready.
one in-
I'm ready to go.
There's one in there.
Alright, so we're gonna table that. So that means we have to close the other motion somehow, right?
No,
No?
the other ones.
Sounds good.
The only point is, does anybody else have any comments on that?
Well, I think if anyone else does, the best thing is to do is to try to do what we intended. Send your revisions to Dan, the chair, and then he can get them to Ron so we're ready to discuss them next time. Sound good?
I apologize.
It's okay. Life happens. Don't worry.
Peter.
All right. So we got one set of minutes all set. We're waiting on the other second set of minutes. We got about 3 minutes left. I don't think we have time for a discussion on the recommendation to the school board. Are we in agreement on that?
Correct.
But it sounds like we do have some and I'm gonna roll this into recap and action. We had a good discussion with Kyle this evening. It sounds like I got some work to do to take some of this stuff to get ready to discuss at the next facilities meeting. To look like, if we take our current high school numbers, what does that look like using parts of the building to kind of put that out? And we can kind of take that motion. I think we need to not, Dan, if you're there, jump in, because I don't want to direct anyone, it's not my purview to direct anyone here. But there was a proposal of what the written recommendation would be to the school board, and I know people had thoughts on that, right? I don't think we can edit back and forth through email, right? Let's not do that. If you have the initials thing, we have to start with something. Dan wrote something to start with. If you have suggestions, write them, document them, so we're prepared to discuss that recommendation next time.
I disagree with that.
And we can talk about a different format, but someone's gotta do some work so we can get something started.
The reason being, I disagree with that, because there was no direction given to actually put anything together based upon the direction of the FIC.
I think
It wasn't a direction.
It wasn't a direction. I took it upon myself to try and facilitate discussion.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that, but it should not have come out from the chair as this is what we're going to discuss. It should have come to us is what do we want to have drafted for a starting point of a recommendation to the school board?
I thought
What
that's
is the
what Dan
content?
did.
Huh?
I thought that's what Dan did.
The only
No,
issue I
Dan
have.
didn't do it.
That's exactly what Joe did.
So
No,
Or Joe,
no,
whoever did,
no.
Dan wrote it, I'm
He
sorry.
did not do that because there was no direction, because, hang on just a minute. The reason, this particular document actually conflicts with what we voted on at the last meeting, which is to not consider both options. And so
what-
therefore,
so
it should have
what's the
come back to this
suggestion so we can
committee.
make progress for.
It should have come back to this committee and revisited that decision, and therefore,
It's not the actual recommendation.
It's just a start.
It's a starting
The
point.
realistically, the only main issue is we can't reply all. You get too many reply alls, you have an unnoticed meeting. So there is actually nothing wrong with saying, here's what I'm thinking, everybody think about it, come prepared to discuss. We cannot reply all.
Right. That's all I was doing, is I wanted to put something out there, ask for an agenda item, and we're
No,
gonna discuss it.
I hear you.
I apologize, I thought Dan wrote it.
Ron,
fine.
you obviously wanted both options to be considered since you brought that forward. Joe took it upon himself, for better or worse, and it was submitted as if it was coming from the chair.
No, I know.
Can we
It's-
start
he-
with that at least?
He didn't say it was from him. He said it was from me. I asked for an agenda item. He did not say, Dan wrote this, or Dan is putting this forward as the recommendation, we're gonna move forward. Dan did not do that.
It is appreciate the.
I asked for an agenda item on the agenda, and that was granted.
All right,
That's all it was.
7:30, it's 7:30, and again, I like to stick to time, right? I gotta put my kid to bed when I get home, I don't need a cranky kid. So, again, I can't be the one to make these decisions, but I think it's helpful when there is a starting point to get things off of.
Platform document, yeah.
Correct. We have something. Is it, we can take this to a vote, that we can at least start off of the document that Joe created. Can we have a vote on that? That doesn't mean that's what the options are gonna be. That doesn't mean that that's the final way it's gonna look. It doesn't mean any of that. But at least it's something to
I don't-
engage in the
Do we even
conversation.
I don't think we need a vote, right? Like, it just needs
No.
to be, we'll have it as
Okay,
an
then
agenda topic at the
great.
next meeting.
Let's not have a
I
vote,
think the
but like,
optics or a vote would be nice, so at least we.
For what?
A vote on
though?
what?
But why? I mean, how
It's- I'm
how
asking-
many
you don't have to
times
vote
did
on
Ron
agenda
say, Put
topics."
me on the agenda for this topic, I've written this stuff.
Yeah.
That's all he's done.
Thank you.
Right?
Good
And
point.
so, okay, I'm
All
sorry, I just got it 2 days ago and my husband's been in the hospital, so I haven't
Sorry.
read it.
okay,
So I'm more
So
than
no
willing to
vote.
read it and talk
sounds
about
great.
it next week, and I
So
don't
we're
think we
gonna
need
just
to
table it for
vote.
the next meeting.
Table
Yeah,
sounds
that's
good. We'll discuss
Yeah.
Joe's proposal of a what the written recommendation is not what could be what the actual recommendation is. If you have thoughts on that, please bring them with you, please educate yourself on that. If you wanna write down your own thoughts, to have them down and ready to go, that's great, and then we can vote on actual recommendations and
Perfect.
wordsmith from there next meeting. Does that make sense?
The 10th.
The 10th?
10th.
Next
The
week.
10th?
No, I'm sorry.
I thought it
I'm
was
sorry,
18.
my
I
bad.
ask one more?
The
Sure.
18th, the 18th.
Are
Sorry,
we
10th
really
or-
gonna still try and have something to the school board on the 18th, or can we get some relief on the date from the school board?
I think
so
you can get
we
some
be-
relief from the school. I cannot speak for the school board. But
Well, what are they
obviously
gonna
they
do if
gave
we
you a
don't put
target
anything
date.
forward?
I'm not being flippant when I say this. I'm not gonna be
They're
flippant when I
gonna
say
kick our
this.
kids out of school?
But if you're not ready to make a recommendation as a committee, don't make a poor recommendation. I think the board would rather you take an additional meeting to or two to finalize a
Right.
recommendation than to rush it by the 18th. What I think they
Realistically, yeah.
didn't want is the recommendation
To last
in the last
forever.
meeting in June, right? Like when everyone leaves for the summer. And I think
It
that's
was an
just-
opportunity to, incentivize progress.
Correct.
And I love it, but I just think we.
But the
we
reality
need
is-
I think the
another
board's
couple
okay
more
with
meetings.
The reality is, you don't wanna make a bad.
And I
bad-
can't speak for them, and I apologize if
But you
my-
speak to them.
But
I do
they're-
So
speak
maybe
to
you
them.
can tell them.
They're very,
sentiment
mostly
for
very
getting the
reasonable
next
people.
Sorry, did you say the 18th or the 10th, Ron?
I'll speak for myself,
We do.
certainly as a member of the
Huh?
board.
We do.
Peter
We do.
speaking.
Meeting next week, to get a good recommendation,
Yes.
whatever that recommendation might be.
I agree with Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Anyone else have any other business before we adjourn for the evening, Dan?
Real quick, without having a crystal ball,
Let's make a motion
the,
to adjourn.
Not yet.
Hold on.
based on our operation guidelines, which until the school board does anything different, they are still our operating manual. Without having a crystal ball, the committee should be prepared to seek nominations at the next meeting for a citizen co-chair.
Yes.
I
So that
think
voting can
that's
happen
good.
at the following meeting.
Well, I think it's pretty much a given, right? Because he's unopposed.
Crazy things happen.
Crazy things have happened. That's why I'm not formally saying, I'm just saying that
The roof at GMS could fall.
the committee should be,
Yeah, we have to move like 7 write-ins.
What do you know?
Why do you
keep saying it? Motion to adjourn the meeting? Seconded.
There was a motion, I hear a second, can we get a vote, please?
Aye.
All in favor, aye.
All in favor, anyone opposed, anyone?
I'd like to stay
Great.
longer
Thank you,
and continue to
everyone.
discuss.
We'll see you all
I have to track down if
next
it's.
time.
Yes.
Conversation, thank you online people, I
do, I
don't know
do.
who's controlling that, but. Bye.
I'm trying to get a hold of it. I'm wearing black.